Jordan Mitchell slammed the invoice down on the mahogany table so hard that the crystal water glasses rattled. Every executive in that room froze. A black man, a single father, a contractor standing inside their $40,000 a month boardroom, refusing to back down. Richard Caldwell leaned back in his leather chair and smiled. "You should be grateful you were even given the opportunity." Jordan looked him dead in the eyes and said 7 words that would bring a $100 million empire to its knees. "Then find someone else to sign for it." And just like that, nobody flew. Not one pilot, not one flight. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe so you never miss what comes next. The alarm went off at 4:47 in the morning. Not 4:45. Not 5 o'clock. 4:47. That was the exact time Jordan Mitchell had calculated down to the minute that he needed to wake up if he wanted to make Amara's scrambled eggs before she got out of bed. Pack her lunch. Double-check her homework folder. Iron her uniform braid. Her hair into 2 neat ponytails the way she liked them, and still make it through the hangar gate before the morning shift supervisor marked him late for the 3rd time that month. He didn't use a fancy alarm clock. Just his phone screen cracked at the corner from when he'd dropped it on the tarmac 8 months ago. He never got around to fixing it. There were always more important things to spend $40 on. Jordan sat on the edge of the bed for exactly 30 seconds. He had learned not to sit longer than that. If he sat longer, he thought about things, and thinking in those quiet morning hours before the world woke up was dangerous territory for a man who had learned to carry his grief quietly, so his daughter didn't have to carry it too. He stood up. He moved. That was the rule. The kitchen was small but clean. Every surface organized in the particular way of a man who understood that chaos in the small things leads to chaos in the big things. Tools arranged by size. Invoices filed by date. Spice rack alphabetized. Not because Jordan was obsessive, but because when you're doing everything alone, systems are the only thing that keeps you from drowning. He cracked 4 eggs into the pan. While they cooked, he opened his laptop on the kitchen counter and pulled up the maintenance request that had come in the night before. A Gulfstream G650. Grounded for 22 months. Previous maintenance contractor terminated. Client requesting emergency evaluation. He scrolled through the attached files. Partial maintenance logs. Blurry scans of inspection documents. A list of 3 major aviation service companies that had previously assessed the aircraft. All 3 had declined. Jordan stopped scrolling. He stared at that line. 3 companies declined. In his 15 years of working on aircraft commercial carriers, private jets, cargo planes, military contract work. During his early 20s, he had seen companies decline projects for 2 reasons. Either the job was genuinely beyond their capability, or the job carried a risk they didn't want anywhere near their reputation. 3 companies declining the same aircraft was not a capacity problem. That was a warning. Jordan closed the laptop. He plated the eggs. He poured orange juice into the plastic cup with the little cartoon rocket ship on it, the one Amara had picked out herself at the dollar store 2 years ago and refused to let him throw away, even though the image was fading. And he stood at the counter and thought about what kind of man opens a door that 3 other men walked away from. "Daddy." The voice came from the hallway, small and sleepy, and the single most important sound in his entire world. Amara padded into the kitchen in her socks, the ones with the little avocado faces on them, rubbing one eye with the back of her wrist. 8 years old. Her mother's nose. Her mother's eyes. The way she tilted her head when she was confused, that was pure Diane right there alive in every gesture. "Morning, baby," Jordan said. She climbed onto her stool and looked at the eggs. "Did you put cheese?" "Did I ever not put cheese?" She thought about it seriously. "One time, when we ran out." "We're not out now." She picked up her fork and ate quietly for a moment. Then in that direct way she had the way that made his chest tight because it reminded him that children notice everything adults try to hide. She looked up and said, "You were on your computer again." Just checking something for work. Were you worried? Jordan poured his own coffee. Why would I be worried? Your face was doing the thing. What thing? The thing where your jaw goes tight. She demonstrated clenching her little jaw. Like this. He laughed, and the laugh was genuine because that was the thing about Amara. She could pull a real laugh out of him even on mornings when a real laugh felt like the hardest thing in the world. I'm fine, he said. Eat your eggs. She ate her eggs. Jordan dropped Amara at school at 7:12 a.m., kissed the top of her head, watched her walk through the double doors and disappear into the building, and then sat in the parking lot for 90 seconds, doing something he would never admit to another grown man. He prayed, not a formal prayer, not hands folded, eyes closed, reciting something memorized. Just a quiet, honest conversation with whatever force in the universe was responsible for keeping an 8-year-old girl healthy and safe for one more day, while her father spent his hours inside the belly of machines that weighed 100,000 pounds and flew 6 miles above the earth. Keep her okay today, that's all I'm asking. Then, he drove to the hangar. Andre Collins was already there. Andre was Jordan's technician, his right hand, and on most days, his only friend in a professional environment where Jordan had learned to keep his personal life invisible. Andre was 31, built like a man who'd spent his 20s doing manual labor because he had and possessed of a particular gift for finding problems inside aircraft systems that computerized diagnostics completely missed. He was also the only person Jordan had ever told in 15 years of working side by side with people what it actually felt like to walk into a room full of executives and watch them look straight through him. Andre looked up from the bench where he was prepping equipment. You saw the Harrington file. Last night, Jordan said, pulling on his work gloves. 3 companies walked away from it. I know. So, Andre set down his torque wrench. What are we doing? Jordan looked at him. We're going to look at the aircraft. We're not signing anything. We're not committing to anything. We look, we assess, and then we decide. And if it's as bad as I think it is, then we walk away too. Andre nodded slowly. And if it's worse than that? Jordan said nothing for a moment. Then we have a different conversation. The call from Victoria Harrington's office came at 9:15 a.m. Jordan had expected a secretary, a scheduler, someone to arrange an introductory meeting 2 weeks out. Instead, the voice on the phone was direct-clipped and slightly impatient, in the way of someone who had not heard the word no often enough to be comfortable with it. Mr. Mitchell, this is Victoria Harrington. I understand you received our maintenance request. I did. Have you had a chance to review it? Enough to know it's complicated. A brief pause. Everything in aviation is complicated. I'm calling because I was told you're the best independent engineer in this region. I need someone who can handle complicated. Jordan leaned against the side of his truck. Who told you that? Captain Raymond Walsh. He said if anyone could evaluate this aircraft honestly, it was you. Jordan knew Walsh. Retired commercial pilot, 28 years flying 747s, the kind of man whose professional opinion meant something in the industry. The fact that Walsh had sent Victoria Harrington his direction told Jordan 2 things. 1, the situation was serious enough that she'd gone looking outside the normal channels, and 2, Walsh trusted him not to cut corners. Ms. Harrington, Jordan said, before we talk about whether I take this job, I need to ask you something directly. Go ahead. The 3 companies that assessed this aircraft before me, did any of them give you written documentation of their concerns before declining? Silence. A longer silence than he expected. No, she finally said. They gave verbal assessments and declined within 24 hours. That's unusual. I'm aware. Ms. Harrington, verbal declines with no documentation typically mean one of 2 things. Either they saw something that they didn't want in writing, or someone persuaded them not to put anything in writing. He let that sit for a moment. Which do you think it was? Another pause. This one felt different, less impatient, more thoughtful. "I don't know," she said. "That's part of why I want someone I can trust." "I'll come look at the aircraft," Jordan said. "But I want complete access to every maintenance record you have, every invoice, every parts purchase, everything. You'll have it. And I want it before I set foot near that plane. I'm not walking into something blind." She didn't hesitate. "I'll have everything sent to you within the hour." They arrived an hour before the documents did. The jet was inside a private hangar at the east end of the regional airport, a separate facility from the commercial terminals, the kind of space that cost more per month than Jordan's annual salary at his previous employer. The hangar was clean temperature controlled and lit with the kind of overhead lighting that made every surface visible. And the aircraft was beautiful. That was the first thing you noticed. Even grounded, even silent. Even after 22 months of sitting idle, the Gulfstream carried itself with a kind of authority. Long fuselage-swept wings, the kind of engineering that represented the absolute pinnacle of private aviation. $100 million sitting perfectly still. Jordan walked a slow circle around the exterior. Andre followed 3 steps behind both of them, quiet, both of them looking. Jordan crouched near the left main landing gear and studied it. He stood and walked to the rear of the aircraft and looked at the engine housings. He didn't touch anything. Not yet. He just looked. And in the looking, he felt something settle in his stomach. Not fear exactly. Something more specific. The particular unease of a man who has been doing this long enough to recognize when something has been deliberately made to look right while actually being wrong. Andre came up beside him and said very quietly, "It's too clean." "Yeah," Jordan said. "Nobody leaves a grounded aircraft this clean unless they're trying to make sure nobody looks at it too hard." "Yeah." They looked at each other. "We still going in?" Andre asked. "We came all the way out here," Jordan said. "Let's see what they don't want us to find." The documents arrived on Jordan's phone while they were still standing outside the hangar. He spent 45 minutes reading through them at a folding table while Andre made coffee on a portable burner he kept in the truck. It didn't take 45 minutes to read the documents. It took 45 minutes because Jordan kept stopping to reread something, stopping to go back to an earlier page and compare dates, stopping to check a parts number against his memory of what that number should reference. By the time he finished the coffee Andre set in front of him, Jordan Mitchell had found 17 discrepancies in the maintenance records. Not suspicions, not possible errors. 17 clear documentable discrepancies between what the records claimed had been done and what the records themselves, when read carefully against each other, showed could not have been done in the timeframes logged. He set down the phone. "Andre." "Yeah." "These records have been altered." Andre put down his own coffee. "You sure?" "The hydraulics inspection on page 12 shows a completion date of March 14th. The parts delivery receipt on page 28 shows those same hydraulic components weren't received until March 19th. He held up the phone. "They signed off on work they hadn't done yet with parts that hadn't arrived." Andre stared at the screen. "That's not a mistake." "No," Jordan said. "It's not." Dunk. The internal inspection took 4 hours. 4 hours that felt to Jordan like excavating a crime scene. Because the more he found, the more it became clear that what had happened to this aircraft was not negligence. Negligence was careless. Negligence was someone taking shortcuts because they were tired or understaffed or underfunded. What Jordan found inside this airplane was deliberate, calculated. The kind of thing you did when you knew exactly what you were hiding and had spent time thinking about how to hide it. The avionics bay showed evidence of components that had been replaced not with certified parts from an authorized supplier, but with parts that bore certification numbers that, when Jordan cross-referenced them against the FAA database on his phone, returned no results. Numbers that didn't exist in any legitimate certification record. He photographed everything. He cataloged every discrepancy with precise, methodical documentation. Location, component, part number, discrepancy description, photographs from multiple angles. Time-stamped. Twice. Andre looked up from what he was documenting and said, "Jordan, I need you to take a break for a second and just..." And both times Jordan said, "Keep working." Because Jordan Mitchell had built his professional life on one unbreakable principle: you don't stop in the middle of the truth. At 3:47 in the afternoon, inside the cockpit of a $100 million aircraft that had been sitting idle for 22 months, Jordan found the thing that made everything else small by comparison. The primary flight control interface module, the computer system that translated pilot inputs into actual aircraft movement, had been replaced. That was in the records. Documented, logged as a certified replacement completed 14 months ago. But the module that was installed in this aircraft was not the model listed in the documentation. It was not even close. Jordan sat in the co-pilot's seat and stared at the module, and for approximately 30 seconds, he did not move. "Andre," he said. "Yeah." "Come up here." Andre climbed into the cockpit and looked at where Jordan was pointing. The silence lasted long enough that Jordan could hear the ambient hum of the airport beyond the hangar walls. "That's not a certified replacement," Andre said. "No. That's..." Andre stopped. Looked again. "That's a modified component. The certification plate is from a completely different model." "Someone removed the original plate," Jordan said, "and attached it to this unit. How long has that been in there?" "Based on the documentation, 14 months. Andre was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Jordan, if that unit fails in flight..." "I know. The pilots wouldn't have any warning. The failure cascade would..." "I know, Andre." Another silence. "What are you going to do?" Andre asked. Jordan looked at the module. He looked at his own reflection in the dark screen above the control panel. He thought about Amara at school, probably in art class right now because it was Thursday afternoon, and Thursday was art class drawing something he'd put on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a little airplane. "I'm going to report exactly what I found," Jordan said. "Everything. Documented. In writing. To Victoria Harrington directly. And if they don't want to hear it..." Jordan stood up. "That's not my problem," he said. "My problem is making sure I've done everything I can so that no one gets hurt." Billionaire. He called Victoria Harrington at 4:15 p.m. She picked up on the second ring. "Mr. Mitchell, how did the assessment go?" "I need to meet with you in person," Jordan said. "Today if possible. This is not a conversation I'm going to have over the phone." A pause. "Is it serious?" "Ms. Harrington, I need you to understand something before I tell you what I found. I'm not calling you to complicate your schedule. I'm not calling you to make a problem bigger than it is. I'm calling you because I found something that changes the entire situation around this aircraft." Another pause, shorter this time. "I'll be at the facility in 45 minutes, she said. Victoria Harrington was not what Jordan had expected. He had heard the name enough. Harrington Global Aviation was the kind of company whose owner you heard about even when you didn't follow the business press. She was 53, built the company from a regional charter operation into an international fleet over 20 years, the kind of success story that got written up in magazines. He had expected the version of her that appeared in those magazines. Polished. Practiced. The performance of confidence. What walked into the hangar was a woman who looked tired in the particular way of someone who had been carrying a problem for a long time and was starting to understand that the problem was larger than she'd admitted to herself. She looked at Jordan. She looked at Andre. She looked at the aircraft. "Tell me," she said. So Jordan told her. He had his laptop open, photographs organized into a clear presentation, not because he'd prepared it in advance, but because 15 years of reporting maintenance findings to clients had taught him that clarity was the only language that cut through denial. He walked her through each discrepancy. He showed her the documentation. He showed her the photographs. He saved the flight control module for last. When he got to it, Victoria Harrington went very still. The certification plate was physically removed from a legitimate component, Jordan said, and attached to an uncertified unit. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. This isn't a mistake, Ms. Harrington. This is fraud. Victoria stared at the photograph on his laptop screen. Richard oversaw all the maintenance contracts, she said, and her voice was quieter now, with an edge in it that hadn't been there before. Richard Caldwell, your operations director. Yes? She looked up from the screen. He's managed every aspect of this aircraft's maintenance for the past 3 years. Jordan said nothing. He didn't have to. How bad is it? Victoria asked. If this aircraft had departed with that module installed, and it almost certainly would have within the next few weeks, based on your schedule, I cannot tell you confidently what the outcome would have been. What I can tell you is that a failure of that system in certain flight phases would give the pilots no time to respond. Victoria turned away. She walked to the far side of the hangar and stood there with her arms crossed facing the wall for about 15 seconds. Then she turned back around. What do I need to do? Immediately. Ground every aircraft in your fleet for inspection. Report what we found to the FAA. Preserve all documentation. Contact your legal team. He paused. And understand that when you do all of that, Richard Caldwell is going to have a very bad day. Victoria looked at him with an expression that Jordan couldn't quite read. You came in here today expecting to do a routine evaluation, she said slowly. And instead, you found this. Yes, you photographed everything. You documented everything before you called me. That's how I work. She nodded slowly. Why? The question surprised him. Why what? Why document it so carefully before telling me? You could have come to me and told me verbally. Kept it informal. Given yourself room to walk away with less involvement. Jordan considered that for a moment. Because 15 years ago, he said, I found a problem on a regional carrier aircraft and reported it verbally to a senior manager. He told me I was mistaken. He said I didn't understand the system. 3 weeks later, that aircraft had a serious incident on approach. Nobody was killed. But it was close. He paused. I swore I would never put myself in a position again where the only proof was my word against someone with more authority. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Mr. Mitchell, she said, I'd like to talk about the contract for repairing this aircraft. He called Amara at 5:30 from the parking lot, sitting in his truck with the heater running because the afternoon had turned cold. Hey, Dad. Hey, baby, how was school? We did fractions. How'd that go? Terrible. He laughed. I'll help you after dinner. Dad. Yeah. Is everything okay? You sound tired. 37 years old. 15 years of professional experience. Former military contract work. A reputation that had traveled far enough to reach the desk of Victoria Harrington through a retired 747 captain. And his 8-year-old daughter could read the entire weight of his day in 2 words on a phone call. I found something hard today, he told her. Honest without being specific. That was the balance. Hard how? Hard like the right thing to do is going to take a lot of extra work. But you're going to do it? Yeah, he said. I'm going to do it. A pause on her end. Then, good, because you always do. He sat in the parking lot for another minute after he hung up. Then, he started the truck. He had work to do. The contract negotiation with Victoria Harrington took 3 days. Not because they couldn't agree on price, because Jordan insisted on terms that Richard Caldwell, who was present at every meeting, and whose smile grew thinner with each passing hour, found deeply inconvenient. Jordan wanted written authorization for every parts purchase before it was made. He wanted direct communication access to Victoria, bypassing the operations team for any safety concern above a defined threshold. He wanted his documentation protocols written into the contract, meaning everything he found would be formally recorded and provided to Victoria's office, not summarized verbally through an intermediary. At the third meeting, Richard finally said what he'd been communicating through body language since the beginning. "Ms. Harrington, I have to say this directly. This level of oversight demand from a contractor is unusual. It suggests a fundamental lack of trust in our organization's processes." Jordan didn't look at Richard. He looked at Victoria. "It suggests," Jordan said calmly, "that I intend to protect both myself and my client from liability. If your processes are sound, the documentation will confirm that. If they're not, you want to know." Richard leaned back. "You're a mechanic, not an auditor. I'm a licensed aircraft engineer with FAA Part 145 certification, 15 years of experience across commercial and private aviation, and I'm currently the only person willing to put his name on a repair of this aircraft." Jordan closed his folder. "If you'd like to continue this conversation without me, that's your choice. But I'm not changing my terms." Richard looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at Jordan. "We'll use Mr. Mitchell's terms," she said. The work began the following Monday. Jordan and Andre arrived at the hangar at 6 a.m. They had a work plan Jordan had drafted over the weekend, a complete sequenced repair protocol that addressed every documented discrepancy in order of safety criticality. The flight control module was first. Jordan had already identified a certified replacement from a verified supplier. He'd traced the part number, confirmed the certification, spoken directly with the supplier's compliance officer, and received written confirmation that the component met every specification required for this aircraft model. When the first parts delivery arrived, Jordan inspected each component personally. Serial numbers checked against supplier documentation. Certification paperwork verified against FAA records. Physical condition assessed before anything was logged as received. Andre watched him go through the third consecutive delivery with the same methodical scrutiny and said, "You know, most engineers don't do this part themselves. Most engineers trust a supply chain that someone else verified." Jordan said, turning a hydraulic fitting over in his hands and examining the threading. "I verify my own supply chain. Takes twice as long. It takes exactly as long as it takes to know what you're working with." Andre said nothing for a moment. Then, "What do you think Richard is going to do?" Jordan set down the fitting. "He's going to try to slow us down. He's going to find reasons to delay parts approvals. He's going to question my labor hours. He's going to look for any justification to reframe this in a way that puts the problems on me instead of on the existing condition of the aircraft." So what do? We document everything as we go. Every day, every hour, every decision, every communication. Even if it's never needed. "Especially if it's never needed," Jordan said. "The documentation you never need is the documentation that protects you when you need it most." By the end of the first week, Jordan had submitted 2 formal safety concern notifications to Victoria's office as specified in the contract. Richard called him on Friday afternoon. "Mr. Mitchell, these notifications you've been filing, they're creating concern at the executive level." "They're meant to," Jordan said. "That's their purpose. There's a perception that you're generating unnecessary anxiety about a project that's progressing well. The notifications document legitimate safety findings. If that creates anxiety, the appropriate response is to address the findings, not to stop documenting them. Your approach is..." Richard paused, and Jordan could hear the careful selection happening on the other end of the line. "Your approach is different from how we typically operate." "I know," Jordan said. "I suspect that's why the previous 3 contractors walked away." Silence. "We'll talk next week," Richard said, and hung up. Andre, who had been listening, looked up. "He's going to be a problem," Andre said. "He's already a problem," Jordan said. "The question is what kind." Mud. 3 weeks into the project, the parts delays began. A hydraulics component that Jordan had ordered through the approved process authorization submitted supplier, confirmed delivery scheduled, was placed on administrative hold by the operations department. No explanation. Just a hold notification in the procurement system. Jordan called the procurement coordinator. She apologized and said she didn't have authorization to explain the hold. He sent a written inquiry to Richard Caldwell's office. No response for 2 days. On the third day, he received a 3-line email stating that the component was under cost review and would be released once the finance team had completed their analysis. Jordan printed the email, filed it, wrote a memo documenting the delay, its impact on the repair timeline, and the fact that he had communicated the schedule impact to Victoria's office in writing. Andre said, "This is going to cost us." "Yes," Jordan said. "We can't absorb holds like this indefinitely." "I know." "So what?" "I know Andre." Jordan looked at the work schedule on the whiteboard they'd set up in the hangar corner. "I'm going to do something I've never had to do before on a job." "What's that?" He looked at the schedule. At the gap where the delayed component should have been. "I'm going to fund it myself, temporarily, to keep the timeline on track." He turned to Andre. "We document that too. Amount, date, reason, which approval was delayed, and by whom. Everything." Andre stared at him. "Jordan, you're going to use your own money. Temporarily. What if they don't pay you back?" Jordan was quiet for a moment. "Then I'll have a different problem," he said. "But the aircraft won't." He didn't tell Amara about the money. He told himself he was protecting her, and he was. But late at night, sitting at the kitchen table after she was asleep, looking at the numbers in his bank account and the numbers on the project spreadsheet, he understood something that children never get to understand: the weight of doing the right thing when the wrong thing is easier and cheaper and less exhausting. He sat at that table on a Tuesday night 3 weeks into a project that should have been straightforward, and he thought about Diane. He didn't let himself do this often. Grief was a luxury in his schedule, which was both a terrible thing to know about yourself and a true one. But sitting there in the quiet kitchen looking at numbers that represented money, he didn't really have to spare. He thought about what Diane would say. She would say, "Jordan, you are the most stubborn man I have ever loved." And she would say it like a compliment. He smiled at the table. He closed the laptop. He went to bed. Tomorrow, he had work to do. The 4th week started with a phone call Jordan didn't want to take. It was 6:23 in the morning. Amara was still asleep. Jordan was standing at the kitchen counter with his first cup of coffee, reviewing the day's work schedule on his laptop, when his phone lit up with a number he recognized as Harrington Global's main office line. He picked up. "Mr. Mitchell?" It wasn't Victoria. It was a voice he didn't recognize, younger, controlled professional in the way of someone who had been trained to deliver bad news without sounding like they were delivering bad news. "This is Claire Nguyen from the Executive Operations Office. Mr. Caldwell asked me to reach out regarding your most recent parts requisition." Jordan set down his coffee. "The hydraulic actuator assembly." "Yes, that order has been placed under secondary review. It was already under cost review for 11 days, Jordan said. "I have documentation of the delay and its impact on the repair schedule." That documentation was submitted to Ms. Harrington's office on day 3 of the hold. A brief pause. "I understand. Mr. Caldwell wanted to make you aware that additional review may take another 10 to 14 business days." Jordan was quiet for a moment. "Ms. Nguyen," he said, "do you know what happens to an aircraft repair timeline when a critical path component is delayed by 3 weeks? I'm not in a position to speak to technical specifics. The entire schedule shifts. Every subsequent task that depends on that component gets pushed back. What was a 6-week project becomes an 8-week project. And when an 8-week project becomes a 10-week project, the client starts asking why the contractor is behind schedule." He paused. "And then somehow the contractor becomes the problem." Another pause. Longer this time. "I'll pass your concerns along," Claire said. "Please also pass along this," Jordan said. "I'm filing a formal timeline impact notification today. Every day of additional delay on this component will be documented with the specific approval hold as the documented cause. I want that on record." "Of course," she said. And she hung up. Jordan stood at the counter for a moment. Then he opened his laptop, pulled up the documentation folder he had organized for this project, and started typing. He documented the call. Time, duration, name of the person, content of the conversation. Approximate duration of the new delay. Expected schedule impact. He saved the file. He started another cup of coffee. He woke Amara up for school. That was the discipline of it. That was the thing that people who had never been in his position didn't understand. You didn't fight back with anger. You didn't make dramatic gestures. You documented. You kept working. You kept your daughter's morning routine exactly the same because the stability of her morning was the one thing in your life you had complete control over, and you protected it like the sacred thing it was. Jordan made the eggs. He packed the lunch. He braided the ponytails. And somewhere between dropping Amara at school and arriving at the hangar, he made a decision he had been circling for 3 days. He was going to find out exactly who the part supplier was connected to. Andre was on his second cup of coffee from the portable burner when Jordan walked in and said, "I need you to help me trace something." Andre looked up. "The supplier. The original one. Before I came on. The company that provided the uncertified components. I thought Harrington's legal team was handling that." "They're handling their end," Jordan said. "I want to understand mine." Andre set down his cup. "What are you looking for specifically?" "The component that was installed in the flight control bay, the one with the swapped certification plate. That's a physical modification. Someone had to do it. Someone ordered the original legitimate component to get its certification plate. Someone then installed the modified unit in its place. That's not one person working alone. That's a chain." Andre was quiet for a moment. "You think it goes higher than a supplier?" "I think," Jordan said carefully, "that whoever set this up understood the aircraft systems well enough to know exactly which component to compromise. That's not a random supplier cutting corners. That's someone who knew what they were doing and why." "And you think that someone is inside Harrington?" Jordan didn't answer directly. "I think the documentation will tell us what we need to know. Pull the original supplier invoices from the files Victoria sent us. Let's look at the timeline of when this company first started providing parts to Harrington Global versus when Richard Caldwell became operations director." Andre stared at him. "You want me to cross-reference invoice dates against an executive hire date?" "Yes." "Jordan." Andre lowered his voice even though they were alone in the hangar. "If you're right about this, then we document it and give it to Victoria Harrington. That's all. We're not investigators, we're engineers. But engineers deal in facts, and facts have to go somewhere." Andre looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," he said. "Let's look." It took them most of the morning. Andre pulled up the supplier documentation while Jordan continued work on the sections of the aircraft that didn't depend on the delayed component. They worked in parallel, Jordan with his hands inside the avionics bay. Andre at the folding table with 2 laptops and a legal pad filling up with dates and numbers. At 11:47 a.m. Andre said, "Jordan." Something in his voice made Jordan stop what he was doing. He climbed down from the maintenance platform and walked to the table. Andre had drawn a simple timeline on the legal pad. On the left side, dates. On the right side, events. He pointed to a line near the top. Caldwell becomes operations director. October 2019. He pointed to the next line. First invoice from Meridian Aircraft Solutions. The questionable supplier appears in Harrington's procurement records. November 2019. Jordan looked at the legal pad. 1 month, he said. 1 month, Andre confirmed. And it's not just the timing. Look at this. He turned one of the laptops toward Jordan. Meridian Aircraft Solutions was incorporated in September 2019. 1 month before Caldwell took the operations job. 2 months before they got their first Harrington contract. Jordan read the screen. He read it again. A brand new company, he said. No history, no previous clients. Gets its first major aviation contract within 2 months of incorporation from a company whose new operations director started the same month the supplier was incorporated. In a regulated industry where suppliers normally need years of track record to get certified vendors approved, Andre said. They looked at each other. Jordan said, "How did Meridian get on the approved vendor list?" Andre pointed to another document on the second laptop. Vendor approval was processed through the operations department. Signed off by... He paused. Richard Caldwell. The hangar was very quiet. Outside somewhere on the airfield, a ground vehicle beeped as it reversed. Normal sounds, airport sounds, the sounds of a working day. Jordan straightened up. Print everything, he said. Every invoice, every date, the incorporation record, the vendor approval, everything we found this morning. What are we going to do with it? We're going to put it in the documentation file, and then I'm going to call Victoria Harrington. Today. Today, Jordan said. Because if I'm right about what this is, she needs to know before Richard Caldwell figures out that we've been looking. He didn't call Victoria from the hangar. He called her from the parking lot sitting in his truck with the engine off because he had learned over 15 years that the location where you deliver serious information matters. Inside the hangar, voices carried. And this was not a conversation for carrying. She picked up on the third ring. Mr. Mitchell, Ms. Harrington, I need to speak with you directly, not through the operations office, not through Claire Nguyen. I need 30 minutes with you today, and I need you to not mention this call to anyone in your office before we meet. A very brief pause. How serious? Serious enough that I'm asking you to keep it between us until we talk. 4 o'clock, she said. My private office. Come through the south entrance and tell security you're there for a technical consultation. I'll be there. He spent the hours between noon and 3:30 doing two things simultaneously, continuing the repair work with a focus and precision that Andre later said was the most intense he'd ever seen Jordan work, and organizing every piece of documentation they'd gathered that morning into a clear sequential presentation. He was not angry. That was the thing that might have surprised people who knew him, or people who assumed they knew what a black man in his position should feel when he uncovered something like this. He was not angry. He was precise. He was deliberate. He was the person he had trained himself to be since the early days of his career, when he understood that in rooms where he was the only person who looked like him, he could not afford the luxury of letting his emotions run ahead of his evidence. Anger was a feeling. Evidence was a fact. Facts won. Victoria Harrington's private office was different from the conference rooms where Jordan had met with her previously. Smaller, more personal. There were photographs on the credenza behind her desk, a younger version of her in a flight suit standing in front of a small plane, what looked like a company anniversary photo. A picture of two teenagers who were probably her kids. She stood when he came in. "Sit down," she said. "Tell me." So he told her. He walked her through the timeline, the same way he'd walked her through the aircraft findings the first time, methodically, without editorializing, letting the facts carry their own weight. He showed her the dates. He showed her the incorporation record. He showed her the vendor approval. He showed her the chain from Meridian Aircraft Solutions to the uncertified components to the compromised aircraft. Victoria Harrington sat across from him and did not say a word for the entire presentation. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You put all of this together today," she said. "Andre and I put it together this morning." "Based on documents I provided you?" "Yes." "Which means this information has been in our possession the entire time." She said it softly, not as an accusation of anyone in particular, more as a recognition of something painful. "We just never looked." "The documentation was scattered across multiple departments," Jordan said. "It would have taken someone specifically looking for the pattern to connect it. Most internal teams aren't looking for patterns. They're processing individual transactions." Victoria stood up. She walked to the window, the same motion he'd noticed before when she needed a moment to process something difficult, and stood there with her back to him. Then she said, "Richard has been with this company for 6 years. I know. He oversaw the fleet expansion, the international routes, the new hangar construction." She paused. "I trusted him." Jordan said nothing. "I want to be angry at you," she said, and then immediately, "That's not fair. I know that's not fair, but there's a part of me that wants to be angry at the person who brought this into the room." She turned around. "Isn't that a terrible thing to say?" "No," Jordan said. "It's a human thing to say." She looked at him directly. "You didn't have to bring this to me. You could have repaired the aircraft, collected your fee, and walked away. What we found in the records," she gestured toward his folder, "is technically outside the scope of your contract. An uncertified component connected to a fraudulent supply chain that went through your operations director is not outside my scope," Jordan said. "Because if I fix the aircraft, certify it as airworthy, and then someone dies on that plane next year when another compromised component fails, that's my signature. That's my name. And more than that," he stopped for just a moment, "that's someone's family." Victoria looked at him for a long time. "I'm going to call our legal team tonight," she said, "and the board. And I'm going to ask you not to communicate with Richard Caldwell or anyone in the operations department until you hear from me." "Understood. And Mr. Mitchell." She picked up his documentation folder. "I want you to make a copy of everything in here. Keep it somewhere separate from the project files, somewhere only you have access to." Jordan nodded slowly. "You're expecting pushback." "I'm expecting Richard to have friends in this building I don't know about," she said, "and I want you protected." He was in the truck at 4:58 p.m., heading to pick up Amara from after-school care, when Richard Caldwell called. Jordan stared at the phone. He had two choices. He could let it go to voicemail, which would tell Richard that something had changed. Or he could answer and give nothing away, which required a particular kind of steadiness that Jordan had developed over years, but that was on this particular afternoon harder than usual. He answered. "Mitchell." "Richard." Jordan kept his voice exactly the same as it always was on these calls. "What can I do for you?" "I wanted to touch base about the timeline." Richard's voice was smooth, practiced. The voice of a man who had spent years learning how to make pressure sound like helpfulness. "I know the parts delays have been frustrating. I wanted to personally let you know that I'm expediting the review on the hydraulic actuator." "I appreciate that. I also wanted to say," a small pause, "I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot, you and I. I'd like to buy you dinner this week. Get to know each other better. Talk about the project." Jordan watched the road. "I appreciate that, Richard," he said. "I'm pretty committed in the evenings this week. Single dad schedule." Of course. Maybe next week." "Maybe so. Everything going all right at the hangar? Any concerns I should know about?" And there it was. The question buried under 3 sentences of pleasantries. Jordan had known it was coming. He'd felt it from the first word of the call. Richard was checking. Either someone had seen Jordan go into Victoria's private office, or Richard had noticed something in the documentation files, or he'd simply developed the instinct of a man with something to hide, that something had shifted. "No new concerns beyond the schedule impact from the parts hold," Jordan said. "I documented all of that this week." Good. Just keeping communication open." "Always appreciate that," Jordan said. He hung up. He sat at a red light and breathed slowly through his nose. Richard knew something was different. He didn't know what yet, but he knew. Which meant Jordan had significantly less time than he'd hoped. He picked up Amara at 5:17. She bounded out of the after-school program with her backpack half open and a painting in her hand, something with a lot of blue and yellow that she held up triumphantly as she climbed into the truck. "I made it for you," she said. "For your office." Jordan took the painting carefully, blue and yellow. He squinted at it. "What is it?" "It's an airplane," she said, with the patient exasperation of an 8-year-old explaining something obvious. "Because of your job." He looked at the painting. He looked at his daughter. "It's perfect," he said. "I know," she said simply, and buckled her seatbelt. He put the painting on the passenger seat between them and drove home, and for the 12 minutes it took to get there. The entire weight of the day, the documentation, the timeline. Victoria's face when she understood what it meant. Richard's voice on the phone feeling around for what had changed. All of it receded to the background noise behind the sound of his daughter telling him about fractions. The next morning, everything accelerated. Jordan arrived at the hangar at 6 a.m. Andre was already there, which was unusual. Andre typically arrived at 6:30, and the look on his face when Jordan walked in was the look of a man who had been waiting with something he didn't want to say. "What happened?" Jordan asked. "I got a call at 5:30, Andre said. "From the parts supplier. The certified hydraulic actuator we ordered, the one under the hold." "Yeah." "It was canceled." Jordan stopped. "What?" "The order was canceled. From Harrington's procurement system, yesterday at 6 p.m. Jordan stared at him. 6 p.m. 1 hour and 2 minutes after Jordan left Victoria Harrington's private office. Who authorized the cancellation? Andre showed him the email on his phone. The cancellation notice from the supplier with the reason code client request. Purchase order canceled by Operations Department. Operations Department. Richard. Jordan set down his bag. He did not sit. He stood in the middle of the hangar and thought very clearly and very quickly about what the next 12 hours needed to look like. "Call the supplier back," he said. "Tell them to hold the component. Don't reship, don't reallocate it, just hold it. Tell them we're reissuing the purchase order within 48 hours. "Can we do that without the authorization hold? "I'm going to call Victoria right now." "Jordan, it's 6 a.m. "I know." He called Victoria Harrington at 6:03 in the morning. She answered before the second ring. "I was expecting your call," she said. "The parts order was canceled." "I know. I found out 20 minutes ago. Richard canceled it through the procurement system at 6 p.m. yesterday." "So he knows. He knows something. I'm not certain how much." Her voice was calm in the measured way of someone maintaining control over a situation that was trying to escape control. "I spoke with our legal team last night. They want to move quickly. The board chair is being notified this morning." "In the meantime," Jordan said, "I need that actuator order reinstated. I can reissue it from my end with supplier authorization, but I need a Harrington procurement code to do it. I'll have Claire send you an emergency authorization code within the hour, one that bypasses the operations approval chain." "Can you do that?" "It's my company, Mr. Mitchell." A pause. "I should have been more directly involved in oversight a long time ago." He heard something in her voice that he recognized, not guilt exactly, but the particular sadness of a person looking back at the gap between who they intended to be and what they actually allowed to happen. "Ms. Harrington," he said, "for what it's worth, this kind of thing is designed to be invisible. Whoever set it up counted on the normal trust between an executive and her operations director. That's not a failure of your character. It's an exploitation of it." She was quiet for a moment. "Thank you for that," she said, and she meant it. Yet, the emergency authorization code arrived at 7:14 a.m. Jordan reissued the purchase order for the hydraulic actuator at 7:19 a.m. At 8:05 a.m. Richard Caldwell appeared at the hangar. Jordan had not expected him to come in person. He'd expected another call, another email, another maneuver from behind the operations office's administrative distance. But Richard walked through the hangar entrance at 8:05 in a wool overcoat that probably cost more than Jordan's truck. And he came alone, and he looked at Jordan with the particular expression of a man who has decided to take control of a situation by walking directly into it. "Mr. Mitchell," he said. "Good morning." "Richard," Jordan said. He didn't stop what he was doing. He was checking torque specs on a panel he'd reseated the previous day, and he kept checking them while he talked. "I heard about the parts order issue," Richard said. He walked into the hangar slowly, hands in his coat pockets looking at the aircraft. "A procurement error. These things happen. I wanted to come personally and make sure it wasn't causing any problems." "Already resolved," Jordan said. "New authorization came through this morning." Richard stopped. "Already resolved." He repeated it slowly. "Through which channel?" "Emergency authorization. Direct from Ms. Harrington's office. A silence. Richard walked a few more steps toward the aircraft and stood looking at it. "You've developed quite a direct line to Victoria," he said. "I have a reporting structure written into my contract," Jordan said. He set down the torque wrench and looked at Richard directly for the first time since he'd walked in. "Direct communication access to Ms. Harrington for safety-related matters. I believe you were present when that was agreed upon." "I was." Richard smiled. The smile didn't reach his eyes. It was an unusual request. Most of my requests are. They looked at each other across the space of the hangar. Jordan had been in rooms like this before. Not literally, not in a $100 million aircraft hangar with a man in a wool overcoat, but in the essential version of this room. The version where a man with more institutional power than you has come to remind you of that fact without quite saying it out loud. Jordan had been in that room at 24, at 28, at 31. He had been told in 100 different ways that his expertise was conditional, that his presence was tolerated rather than valued, that the work he did was acceptable, but his judgment about that work was not. He had learned through those years that the men who came to remind you of your place always gave themselves away in the same moment. It was always the moment when they realized the reminder wasn't working. Richard was at that moment right now. "I want to be straightforward with you," Richard said. "I'd appreciate that," Jordan said. "This project has been significantly more complicated than it needed to be. I think some of that is the nature of the aircraft's condition. But some of it," he paused, "is an approach to documentation and reporting that has created unnecessary alarm at the executive level." "Documented safety findings create alarm," Jordan said. "That's their purpose. There's a difference between documented findings and an ongoing pattern of escalation that disrupts operations." "Richard." Jordan said it quietly, not loudly, not aggressively, just clearly. "I found an uncertified flight control component installed in this aircraft with a fraudulent certification plate. I found maintenance records that were falsified. I found a parts supplier that was incorporated 1 month before your hire date and approved by you 1 month after that." He paused. "That's not escalation. That's documentation." The hangar was very quiet. Richard's expression did not change. That was the most interesting part. A man who had not expected to hear those specific words would have reacted. His expression would have shifted. His body would have done something, a small movement, a change in posture, a tightening somewhere. Richard's expression did not change, which meant he had known somewhere in the back of whatever calculation he was running this morning that this was a possible version of this conversation. He had thought about it. He had prepared for it. "You've been busy," Richard said. "I've been doing my job," Jordan said. "Those are very serious accusations." "They're documented findings. I don't make accusations. I present evidence." Richard looked at him for a long moment. "You should be very careful, Mr. Mitchell," he said, "about what you think you know versus what you can prove." "I appreciate the advice," Jordan said. "I'll add this conversation to the documentation." Something moved through Richard's face, then small and fast, and not quite anger. More like the recalculation of a man who has realized that the position he thought he occupied is not actually the position he occupies. "I'll see myself out," Richard said. He walked back toward the hangar entrance. At the door, he stopped and turned back. "You're good at this," he said. And there was something in his voice that might, in another context, have been almost respectful. "Better than I expected." Jordan picked up his torque wrench. "I know," he said. Richard left. Andre appeared from behind the aircraft, where he had been working and listening the entire time. "You know he's going to try to end this contract," Andre said. "Yes. Today. Probably." "What do we do?" Jordan looked at the aircraft, at the work still to be done, at the panel he'd been checking when Richard walked in. "We keep working," he said. "We document what just happened. We send a summary to Victoria's office, and we keep working. What if they terminate the contract? Then we stop working, Jordan said simply. But we don't stop documenting. Andre nodded slowly. You know, Andre said most people would have taken a smaller job by now. Something easier. Something where nobody's watching you like this. Jordan picked up his torque wrench. Most people, he said, haven't made a promise to a dead woman to give their daughter a world where doing the right thing matters. Andre was quiet. Jordan got back to work. The termination attempt came at 2:17 p.m. It came not from Richard directly, but from the company's external legal counsel, a firm Jordan had never heard of, in the form of a formal letter emailed to Jordan's business address and simultaneously faxed to the hangar facility. The letter cited breach of contract due to unauthorized communications with executive leadership budget overruns caused by unilateral parts ordering and conduct inconsistent with the professional standards expected of a contracted service provider. Jordan read the letter twice. Then he forwarded it to Victoria Harrington with a one-line note. Please see attached. I believe this requires your attention. Her response came 11 minutes later. I've already spoken to our legal team. Disregard this communication. Your contract is not terminated. I'll explain everything shortly. He looked at the message. He set the phone down. He kept working. At 3:45 p.m. Victoria called. Richard has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation, she said. The board met this morning. The legal team has been given everything you documented. The letter from external counsel was sent without board authorization and has been formally withdrawn. Jordan sat on a parts crate in the corner of the hangar and stared at the floor. The investigation is going to take time, Victoria continued. But I want you to hear this directly from me. You are not going anywhere. Your contract stands. You have the full support of this company. Thank you, Jordan said. Don't thank me yet, she said. There's still the matter of your final invoice, and I want to tell you personally before anyone else does. She paused. Some members of the board have concerns about the total cost. They're going to try to renegotiate. Jordan was quiet. Of course they are, he said. I'm going to fight for what you're owed, Victoria said. I want you to know that. Ms. Harrington, Jordan said, with respect, don't fight for me. Fight because the invoice is accurate. Fight because every dollar on that invoice is documented. Fight because the alternative is paying me less than what was agreed to do a job that saved this company from a catastrophe that would have made my invoice look like parking change. A brief pause. You're right, she said. I know, Jordan said. I'll have the final report on your desk by the end of the week. He hung up. Andre was watching him from across the hangar. Administrative leave, Andre said. It wasn't really a question. Yeah. Is it over? Jordan looked at the aircraft, at the remaining work, at the list on his tablet of what needed to be completed before he could certify this aircraft as airworthy and put his name on it with the full force of everything his name meant. The investigation is just starting, he said. He stood up, our part is almost done. He picked up his tools. He had 4 more days of work to do. He was going to do every single hour of it right. 4 days. That was what Jordan had said, and 4 days was what he delivered. Not 4 days and a morning. Not 4 days with a caveat about pending paperwork or outstanding approvals or components still in transit. 4 days of work, so precise, so methodical, so thoroughly documented, that when Jordan Mitchell closed his toolkit on the evening of the 4th day and walked a final inspection around the aircraft. Andre Collins, a man who had seen Jordan work for 6 years and was not given to exaggeration, stood at the foot of the maintenance stairs and said quietly, I've never seen a cleaner job. Jordan didn't respond right away. He was looking at the aircraft the way he always looked at finished work, not admiring it, not celebrating it, but interrogating it. Looking for the thing he might have missed. The fastener that was right, but not quite right. The panel seam that sat a millimeter proud. The indicator light that cycled correctly, but cycled just a half second slower than the manual specified. He found nothing. The aircraft was right. Not acceptable. Not within tolerances. Right. The way things are right when someone who genuinely cares about what they're doing has put 15 years of knowledge and 6 weeks of focused intensity into a single object. Final systems check in the morning, Jordan said. Then I sign the airworthiness documentation. And then, Jordan picked up his bag. And then we submit the invoice and find out what kind of people we're actually dealing with. Andre looked at him. You already know what kind of people they are. I know what Richard is, Jordan said. The board is a different question. He drove home. He picked up Amara from his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, a 71-year-old retired schoolteacher who had quietly become the third parent in their household, never asking for anything in return, except to be kept informed about how the project was going, because she had decided Jordan's work mattered, and she intended to follow it like a story. How is it going? She asked at the door, while Amara ran past both of them toward the kitchen. Almost done, Jordan said. Mrs. Patterson looked at him with the particular perception of someone who has spent 40 years reading the faces of children and learned that adults are not so different. You look like a man who's almost at the mountain and doesn't trust the ground under his feet, she said. That's about right, he said. She patted his arm. The ground holds, she said. It always holds for people who do things the right way. He thanked her. He went inside. Amara had already found the leftover pasta in the refrigerator and was standing at the counter eating it cold directly from the container with a fork, which was absolutely against the rules, and which Jordan chose not to address, because some battles are not worth the energy on the night before you sign your name to 6 weeks of your life. How was Mrs. Patterson's? He asked. We watched Jeopardy, Amara said with her mouth full. I got 3 right. Which categories? Animal space and one about old movies that I guessed on. That counts. Mrs. Patterson says I'm very smart. Mrs. Patterson is correct. Amara put the pasta container back in the refrigerator. She turned around and looked at her father with that direct, searching look that still caught him off guard after 8 years of being its target. Tomorrow's the last day, right? She said. Jordan stopped. How do you know that? Because you've been counting. She pointed at the small dry erase calendar on the side of the refrigerator, the one they used for school events and doctor's appointments, and the occasional treat like a movie or a trip to the science museum. Someone had drawn small X's through the last 28 days. The marks were smaller than Jordan's usual handwriting, more careful. He looked at the calendar, then at his daughter. Did you make those marks? He asked. Every morning before school, she said. While you were making eggs. He didn't say anything for a moment. I just wanted to know when you'd be less tired, she said. Not accusatory, not sad, just honest with the uncomplicated honesty of a child who hasn't learned yet to wrap the truth in protective packaging. Jordan crossed the kitchen and hugged her. She hugged him back with the unselfconscious intensity of a kid who had not yet decided that showing affection to your parent was something to be embarrassed about. Tomorrow, he said into the top of her head. Last day. Good, she said. Because I need help with fractions. The final systems check took 4 hours. Jordan and Andre ran every diagnostic sequence, every instrument calibration, every control surface response test. They ran them once and then ran them again, because Jordan had a rule about final checks. You do them twice, and the second time you do them as if the first time never happened, and you're starting fresh. Everything passed. Everything passed the second time, too. At 11:23 a.m. Jordan Mitchell signed the airworthiness documentation for the Harrington Global Aviation, Gulfstream G650. Oh. He signed his name in the certification block with the same black pen he used for every signature on every aircraft. He had ever cleared a pen he'd bought at a drugstore for $2 and kept in his shirt pocket every working day for the past 6 years, because he believed privately that the instrument you use to put your name on something should be humble enough to remind you what your name actually means. He signed. He gave the documentation to Andre to countersign as the assisting technician. Andre signed. They stood in the hangar and looked at the aircraft. "It's good," Andre said. "It's good," Jordan confirmed. They shook hands. It was the kind of handshake that doesn't need words around it, because the words are already in it, in the grip, in the duration, in the particular look that passes between two men who have been through something together and come out the other side with the work intact. Jordan submitted the final invoice at 12:05 p.m. $280,000. Labor hours, itemized by date and task. Parts costs each with purchase order reference and supplier documentation. Emergency expenses incurred during parts delays, each with a corresponding delay notification referencing the authorization hold that caused it. Reimbursement for personal funds, advanced to maintain project timeline, documented to the dollar. Every line justified, every number traceable. Jordan had built that invoice the same way he built everything, not to impress anyone, but to survive scrutiny. Because Jordan Mitchell had learned that the work that survives scrutiny is the work that lasts. He sent it to Victoria Harrington's office. Then he went to lunch. The call came at 2:47 p.m. Not from Victoria, from a woman named Susan Park, who identified herself as the Chief Financial Officer of Harrington Global Aviation, and whose voice had the particular precision of someone who manages very large numbers and has learned to treat all conversations as negotiations. "Mr. Mitchell, thank you for submitting your final invoice. I'm calling because the finance team has had a chance to review it, and there are several items we'd like to discuss." Jordan was in his truck in the airport parking lot finishing a sandwich. He put the sandwich down. "I'm listening," he said. "The total amount, $280,000, is significantly higher than our initial project estimate. The initial estimate was based on the maintenance documentation provided before I assessed the aircraft," Jordan said. "Once I identified the full scope of the actual condition, I submitted a revised scope notification. That notification was acknowledged in writing by Ms. Harrington's office on day 2 of the project. I understand. However, there are specific line items." She paused, and he heard papers. "Specifically, the emergency expense reimbursements and the personal funds advancement that fall outside our standard vendor payment structure. Those expenses are documented. Every one of them corresponds to a specific parts delay caused by an authorization hold in the operations department." "Yes, but our standard vendor agreements don't typically provide for reimbursement of personal funds." "Ms. Park," Jordan said, and he kept his voice even and courteous, because this was not the moment for anything else. "My contract with Harrington Global specifically authorizes reimbursement of documented expenses incurred as a direct result of client-side delays. I have written acknowledgement of every hold that caused me to advance personal funds. The contract language is clear." A brief pause. "Our legal team is reviewing the contract language," she said. "Of course." Jordan picked up his sandwich again. "I'll expect their finding in writing. That may take a few days." "Take whatever time you need," Jordan said. "I have copies of everything." He hung up. He finished his sandwich. He called Andre. "The finance team is reviewing the invoice," he said. "How bad?" "Standard opening position for a renegotiation. They're going to challenge the personal expense reimbursements first. Then they'll challenge the revised scope labor hours. Then they'll find something else." "What do we do?" "Nothing," Jordan said. "We let their legal team read the contract. The contract says what it says. I have documentation for every line item. Time is on our side. And if they just decide not to pay the full amount..." Jordan looked out the truck windshield at the aircraft hangar in the distance. "Then I stop them from flying the aircraft," he said. Andre was quiet for a moment. "Can you do that?" "If the airworthiness certification has been issued, but the service provider has an unresolved payment dispute related to the maintenance performed," Jordan said, "I can file a notice with the FAA that places the certification in administrative review pending dispute resolution. The aircraft can't fly commercially during an administrative review." "They will lose their minds," Andre said. "Yes?" Jordan said. "Are you going to do it?" Only if they make me, Jordan said. Give them a chance to do the right thing first. And the executive meeting happened 3 days later. Jordan received a formal invitation. Not a phone call, not an email, but an actual printed invitation delivered by courier to his shop, requesting his presence at Harrington Global Aviation's corporate headquarters for a meeting with the executive team regarding final contract reconciliation. He read the invitation twice. He called Victoria. "Did you send this?" "The board requested the meeting," she said. "I wasn't fully consulted on the format." "Will you be there?" A pause. "Yes. But Jordan, I want to prepare you for something. There are board members who have been briefed on the investigation. Some of them are managing their own exposure from having approved vendor contracts during Richard's tenure. They're going to be in a defensive posture, meaning they'd rather pay me less than admit the full scope of what Richard was doing on their watch. Meaning, Victoria said carefully, that some of them see a reduced payment to a contractor as a much smaller headline than a full internal fraud disclosure. Jordan understood exactly what she was telling him. "They're going to try to buy my silence," he said. "Not as a question. They're going to try to make the number small enough that you take it and go away," she said. "I want you to know that's not my position, but I'm one vote on this board." "I appreciate you telling me," Jordan said. Jordan. She used his first name, which she had only done once before in her private office the afternoon he'd shown her the timeline connecting Richard to Meridian Aircraft Solutions. "Go into that room and make them look at what you have. Don't let them make this about numbers. Make them look at what actually happened." "That's what I do," he said. He arrived at the Harrington Global headquarters 20 minutes early. He wore the same thing he wore every professional day. Clean dark pants, a button-down shirt, his good jacket. Not a suit. He didn't own a suit. And more importantly, he had decided years ago that arriving overdressed to a boardroom meeting when you were the only black man in the room sent its own kind of message. The message that you were trying to look like you belonged rather than simply belonging. He belonged. He knew it. His work proved it. He signed in at the security desk, received a visitor badge, and was escorted to a conference room on the 14th floor. The kind of room that announced its own importance. Long table leather chairs, a view of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows, a credenza along one wall with water carafes and small plates of things Jordan didn't eat. There were 7 people already seated when he walked in. Victoria at the far end. Susan Park, the CFO, 2 seats to the left. 3 men Jordan didn't recognize, but who had the look of board members, the particular combination of expensive watches and practiced neutrality that came from spending years making decisions with large numbers. A man in a charcoal suit who Jordan recognized from his online research as the company's outside legal counsel, and at the head of the table in the chair that announced without stating it that he was running this meeting, a man named Gerald Harrington, Victoria's father, the founder of the company. 71 years old, largely retired from operations for the past 4 years, but present today in the way that a man is present when he has decided that something concerning his legacy needs his personal attention. Jordan had not known Gerald would be here. He adjusted. He sat in the chair indicated across from Susan Park and set his folder on the table. "Mr. Mitchell," Gerald said. His voice was the voice of a man who had been the most important person in most rooms for 40 years. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for having me," Jordan said. "I want to begin by acknowledging the work you've done on this aircraft," Gerald said. "I've reviewed the technical report and the inspection documentation. The quality of the work is not in dispute. I appreciate that. What we need to discuss," Gerald continued, "is the financial reconciliation. The invoice you submitted represents a significant deviation from the original project estimate, and the board has a responsibility to its shareholders to ensure that all expenditures are justified." "They are," Jordan said. "Every one of them. I have documentation for every line." "Some of us have reviewed the documentation," the outside counsel said. He had the kind of voice that was designed to sound reasonable while being entirely adversarial. Our concern is with several categories of expenses that fall outside standard vendor agreements. My contract is not a standard vendor agreement, Jordan said. It was negotiated specifically. The terms are clear. Contract interpretation is always subject to Mr. Jordan paused. He didn't know the lawyer's name. He looked at the man. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name. Harrison, the man said. Douglas Harrison. Mr. Harrison? Jordan opened his folder. I have the contract here. I also have the signed scope modification from week 1, acknowledging the expanded project parameters. I have written documentation of every parts delay caused by operations department authorization holds. I have bank records showing personal funds advanced to maintain the project timeline during those delays, and I have a signed acknowledgement from Ms. Harrington's office dated and timestamped confirming each notification I submitted. He looked around the table. I'm happy to go through every line item. We can do this as slowly as you need. A silence around the table. Gerald looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at her water glass. Mr. Mitchell, one of the unnamed board members said, we're not suggesting your work wasn't valuable. We're suggesting that the total amount, $280,000, Jordan said, seems disproportionate given the original estimate. The original estimate was based on incomplete information, Jordan said. The actual condition of the aircraft was significantly worse than the documentation provided to me indicated. I reported that in writing on day 2. The revised scope was acknowledged in writing. That's not a surprise invoice. That's a documented contract evolution. Nevertheless, Douglas Harrison said, leaning forward slightly, we believe a good faith negotiation. I want to make sure I understand what's being proposed, Jordan said. He looked at Harrison, then at Gerald, then around the table. You're asking me to accept less than the documented contracted amount for work that I completed that has been certified that prevented this company's aircraft from flying with a fraudulent flight control component that could have killed everyone on board. Is that correct? The room was very quiet. That's a dramatic framing of the situation, Harrison said. It's an accurate one, Jordan said. The documentation is accurate. The invoice is accurate. The only question in this room is whether this company intends to honor what it agreed to. Gerald Harrington had not spoken in several minutes. He was looking at Jordan with an expression that Jordan couldn't fully read, something between assessment and discomfort, and something else underneath both of those. You're not going to negotiate, are you? Gerald said. I'll negotiate anything that's genuinely in dispute, Jordan said. Show me a line on this invoice that doesn't have supporting documentation, and we'll talk about it. But I won't negotiate a discount on documented work just because the number is larger than you'd like. Harrison started to say something. Gerald raised one hand slightly, and Harrison stopped. Gerald looked at Jordan. My operations director, Gerald said slowly, apparently spent 3 years directing company funds to a supplier. He had a hidden interest in compromising the safety of a $100 million aircraft in the process. He paused. And the man sitting across from me, a man my operations director actively obstructed, delayed, and attempted to have removed from the project, is the reason that aircraft is now certified airworthy. Yes, Jordan said. Gerald was quiet for a moment. Susan, he said without looking away from Jordan, what are the litigation exposure estimates if we deny the invoice? Susan Park shifted slightly. If Mr. Mitchell pursues a breach of contract claim, given the documentation, he has exposure could be significantly higher than the invoice amount, and the associated discovery process would, she paused, would put everything from the past 3 years into a legal record. The silence that followed that statement was the particular silence of a room full of people absorbing the same information from different directions and all arriving at the same place. Gerald looked at Douglas Harrison. Is there a legal basis to deny the invoice? He asked. Harrison was quiet for a moment. Not a strong one, he said carefully. Gerald nodded slowly. Then he looked at Jordan. Mr. Mitchell, he said, I'm going to say something that this organization should have said to you much earlier than this. He paused. You were brought onto a project that our own people had corrupted. You identified the problem. You documented it correctly. You reported it through the right channels. You were obstructed and you continued working. You advanced personal funds when our procurement system was weaponized against you. Another pause. And then you submitted an invoice for exactly what you were owed. Jordan said nothing. We're going to pay it, Gerald said, in full. Something moved through the room, then a collective exhale, a shift in posture, the atmospheric change of a moment, resolving into a decision. Victoria looked up. She looked at Jordan. And Jordan looked back at her, and in that look passed something that didn't need words. The recognition between two people who had both in their different ways been tested by the same situation, and had both in their different ways held. Thank you, Jordan said. He meant it simply, not triumphantly, not with relief or vindication or any of the dramatic emotions the moment might have warranted. He just meant it. Thank you for doing the right thing. Thank you for being the kind of people who, when the evidence is in front of you, make the right call. Gerald nodded once. I'd also like to discuss, Victoria said, and her voice was steady and clear, a proposal I've been preparing for the board, regarding Mr. Mitchell's future involvement with this company. Jordan looked at her. I'd like to offer you a consulting contract, Victoria said. A standing safety audit relationship. Quarterly fleet inspections, direct reporting to my office, your own protocols. She paused. I've spent 6 weeks watching how you work. This company needs people who work that way. The board members looked at each other. Gerald looked at Victoria, with an expression Jordan couldn't quite read, something between pride and the particular surprise of a father who has underestimated his daughter. Ms. Harrington, Jordan said, I appreciate that. I'd need to review the terms. Of course. But in principle, he paused. Yes. In principle, I'm interested. He called Andre from the parking garage. We're getting paid, Jordan said. Andre made a sound that was not quite a word. Full amount, Andre asked. Full amount. A pause. Jordan. Andre's voice was thick with something. Man. I know. All of it. Every dollar. Every dollar. Another pause. You okay? Andre asked. Jordan sat in the parking garage in the quiet and asked himself that question honestly for the first time in 6 weeks. Not, am I managing, or am I functioning, or am I holding it together? Am I okay? Yeah, he said. I think I actually am. What happens now? I go home, Jordan said. I help my daughter with fractions. I sleep for approximately 9 hours. A pause. And then we talk about the consulting contract they offered. Andre was quiet for a moment. They offered you a contract, quarterly fleet inspections, direct reporting to Harrington, my own protocols. Jordan, Andre's voice changed. I know. That's not a job, that's a position. I know. That's the thing you've been... Andre stopped, started again. That's the thing that should have existed for you 10 years ago. Jordan started the truck. Maybe, he said. But it exists now. He drove out of the parking garage into the late afternoon. The city looked the same as it always did from the driver's seat of a truck with a cracked phone screen on the center console and a small painting of a somewhat abstract airplane tucked behind the visor, because Amara had put it there 2 weeks ago and said it would bring him luck. It looked exactly the same. And somehow, entirely different. He was 20 minutes from home when the call came through on Bluetooth. Number he didn't recognize. He almost let it go. He answered. Mr. Mitchell. The voice was male, older, with a measured authority that Jordan associated with military service or law enforcement, the kind of voice that had learned to carry weight without raising volume. My name is Captain Frank Delgado. I'm the chief pilot for Harrington Global Aviation. Jordan had never spoken to Delgado. He knew the name from the organizational chart Victoria had shared at the start of the project. Captain Delgado, Jordan said. What can I do for you? I've been looking at your certification documentation on the G650 hull, Delgado said. The maintenance report. The systems test results. The component history you compiled. Okay. I've been flying for 31 years, Delgado said. Commercial aviation, private aviation, cargo. I've had a lot of aircraft maintained under my fleet. Okay, Jordan said again, not sure where this was going. I want to ask you something directly, Delgado said. And I want you to answer me the same way. Go ahead. Is this aircraft safe to fly? Jordan thought about the question. Not the answer, he knew the answer. He thought about the question and the weight it carried coming from a man whose life and whose crew's lives and whose passengers' lives depended on the honesty of the person answering. Yes, Jordan said. Every system was inspected and tested twice. Every replaced component is certified and traceable. The documentation is complete and accurate. I put my name on it, and I don't put my name on things I'm not certain of. A long pause on the other end. I've been told the same aircraft was certified by a previous service provider 14 months ago, Delgado said. The previous certification was based on falsified records and included an uncertified flight control component with a fraudulent certification plate, Jordan said. That provider's certification was not valid. Who told you that? The component itself told me that, Jordan said. I documented everything. If you'd like to review my inspection records personally, I'll make them available to you. Another pause. I'd like that, Delgado said. Before I put any of my crew on that aircraft, I'd like to sit down with you and go through it. Name the time and place, Jordan said. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Can you come to the flight operations building? I'll be there. A pause. Mr. Mitchell, Delgado said. I've been in this industry for 31 years. I've dealt with a lot of maintenance contractors. Most of them tell me what they think I want to hear. You just told me something I needed to hear, which is a different thing entirely. I know, Jordan said. I'll see you tomorrow at 7, Delgado said. He hung up. Jordan drove. He was almost home. 3 blocks from the house, he stopped at a red light, and for a moment, just a moment, he let himself feel the full weight of the past 6 weeks. The alarm at 4:47. The eggs and the braided ponytails. The documents and the photographs, and the kitchen table late at night with the numbers. Richard in the hangar with his wool coat and his thin smile. The boardroom and Gerald Harrington's voice saying, "We're going to pay it in full." Andre's voice on the phone saying, "That's the thing that should have existed for you 10 years ago." Amara's small, careful X's on the refrigerator calendar. The light turned green. Jordan Mitchell drove home. Captain Frank Delgado was already at the table when Jordan walked in at 6:58 a.m., 2 minutes early. Jordan noticed that. A man who arrives 2 minutes before a 7 o'clock meeting is a man who arrived at 6:30 and spent the intervening time doing something, reviewing documents, thinking, preparing himself for a conversation he considered important enough to take seriously. Delgado was 61, with the particular physical presence of someone who had spent decades in cockpits, not large exactly, but contained. Economical in his movements. The kind of man whose stillness communicated competence rather than passivity. He had a cup of black coffee in front of him, and Jordan's full inspection report spread across the table in a sequence that told Jordan he had not just glanced at it. He had read it. "Mr. Mitchell," Delgado said, standing to shake hands. His grip was firm without performing firmness. "Captain," Jordan said. He sat down across from him. Delgado looked at him for a moment, the direct assessing look of a man who has spent his career making rapid judgments about who he can trust with his life and the lives of everyone behind him. "I read your report last night," Delgado said. "All of it. The inspection logs, the parts documentation, the system's test results, the section on the flight control module." He paused. "I want to start with that." "Okay," Jordan said. "Walk me through it. Not the paperwork version. Tell me what you actually found when you opened that bay." So Jordan told him. Not the documented version, the human version. What it looked like when he first saw the module. What the certification plate discrepancy told him about the nature of the substitution. what the failure profile of that specific uncertified unit would have looked like under high-demand flight conditions. He spoke the way he spoke when he was telling the truth about something technical plainly, without hedging, without the defensive layer of language that people add when they're worried about liability. Delgado listened without interrupting. When Jordan finished, Delgado was quiet for a moment. "The previous certification," Delgado said. 14 months ago. "Yes. My crew flew that aircraft 4 times after that certification was issued." Jordan said nothing. He let that land. 4 flights, Delgado said. International routes. We had 10 passengers on the longest one, a 9-hour crossing. "I know," Jordan said. Delgado looked at his coffee, then at Jordan. "You're telling me we were flying with that component installed for 14 months? "Based on the documentation timeline, yes." Delgado sat with that for a moment. The particular stillness of a man processing something that has retroactively reframed a large portion of his recent professional experience. "The previous certifying engineer," Delgado said. "The one from the maintenance company that approved that component 14 months ago. I don't know the specifics of their role in the situation," Jordan said carefully. "That's part of what the investigation will determine. What I can tell you is that the certification they issued cannot be supported by what I found when I inspected the aircraft." "Can't be supported," Delgado said slowly. "That's a careful way of saying something." "I try to say exactly what I can document," Jordan said. "Not more." Delgado looked at him. "And what can you document?" "That the component installed in the flight control bay did not match the component specified in the certification record. That the certification plate on the installed component was physically removed from a different unit. That the installed component has no traceable legitimate certification for this aircraft type." Jordan paused. "Those are facts. What they mean in terms of who knew what and when, that's for the investigation." Delgado nodded slowly. "I've been the chief pilot here for 8 years, he said. "I trusted the maintenance chain. I trusted the certification process. I trusted—" He stopped. "I trusted Richard Caldwell's assurances that the vendor relationships were sound." "Most people in your position would," Jordan said. "That trust is supposed to be warranted." "But it wasn't." "No, it wasn't." Delgado looked at the inspection report on the table. "The component you installed as the replacement," he said. "Walk me through the verification process." Jordan walked him through it. Every step. The parts, search the supplier, contact. The certification verification against the FAA database. The compliance officer conversation. The physical inspection of the component on receipt. The installation process, the post-installation systems test. Delgado asked questions. Good questions. Specific questions. The kind of questions that came from 31 years of knowing exactly what could go wrong with an aircraft system, and needing to understand precisely how each potential failure point had been addressed. Jordan answered every one. At 8:15 a.m., after an hour and 17 minutes, Delgado closed the inspection report. "I have one more question," he said. "Go ahead. If your daughter were a passenger on that aircraft, the one you just certified, would you let her board?" The question sat in the air between them. Jordan looked at Delgado directly. "Yes," he said. Without hesitation. Delgado nodded once. "Then I'll fly it," he said. Mad. Except he didn't. Not yet. Because the morning after Jordan's meeting with Delgado, the phone calls started. The first came from a pilot Jordan had never spoken to, a co-pilot named Marcus Webb, who was assigned to the G650's first scheduled post-repair departure. Webb had heard through the pilot community that the aircraft had been grounded for 22 months, that 3 maintenance companies had declined the project, and that the repair had uncovered fraud inside the company's operations department. "I just need to understand something," Webb said. He was 29 by the sound of his voice, young enough to still ask the questions that older pilots sometimes stopped asking because asking them felt like admitting doubt. "The certification, it's solid." "It's solid," Jordan said. The flight control system, the module that was replaced. Certified component, fully traceable, installed and tested correctly. A pause. I heard there was a whole situation with the operations director, Webb said. That there was fraud, that parts were... The fraudulent components have been replaced, Jordan said. The fraudulent records have been documented and reported. What you have now is a complete, accurate maintenance history and a certified aircraft. The fraud is in the past. The certification is current. Another pause. Can I see the inspection report? Captain Delgado has the full report, Jordan said. Ask him. He'll share it. Webb called Delgado. Delgado shared the report. Webb called Jordan back an hour later and said he was satisfied. But then the flight attendant assigned to the departure called the pilot union representative, who called the airline operations safety officer, who called Harrington Global's flight operations department, who called Victoria, who called Jordan. There's a concern among the crew, Victoria said. Her voice was careful, not alarmed, but careful. The investigation disclosure, it's created anxiety in the flight operations team. What kind of concern specifically? They know there was fraud. They know the previous certification was compromised. And they know... She paused. They know there's an ongoing investigation into the full scope of what Richard did. Some of them are worried that what you found is not everything there is to find. Jordan understood immediately. It was a reasonable fear. It was, in fact, the right kind of fear, the kind that kept aviation safe. The instinct that said, if the organization allowed this to happen once, how do I know they've found all of it? Ms. Harrington, Jordan said, the aircraft I certified is the aircraft I certified. I cannot speak to every other aircraft in your fleet. That's what the fleet-wide inspection is for. The fleet-wide inspection is scheduled to begin next week. Until it's complete, Jordan said. I understand why crew members are hesitant about any aircraft in this fleet. That's not a criticism of my work. That's crew members doing exactly what crew members are supposed to do. Victoria was quiet for a moment. So what do I tell them? Tell them the truth, Jordan said. Tell them one aircraft has been fully inspected and certified by an independent engineer with a documented complete process. Tell them the rest of the fleet is under inspection. Tell them the findings will be shared transparently. And then, he paused. Let them make their own decision. And if they decide not to fly, then they don't fly, Jordan said. That's their right. And honestly, Ms. Harrington, a crew that exercises that right when they have genuine safety concerns, is a crew worth keeping. She was quiet again. You're a very unusual person, Mr. Mitchell, she said. I've been told that, he said. Jun. The departure was scheduled for the following Thursday. By Tuesday, two things had happened. Captain Delgado had reviewed the inspection report in full, met with Jordan, and confirmed he would fly the aircraft. And the rest of the crew, 2 co-pilots, 2 flight attendants, had each independently asked to review the documentation before committing. Jordan had said yes to all of them. He had spent Tuesday afternoon in the flight operations break room, not a boardroom, not an executive suite, just the ordinary break room where flight crew spent time between assignments with a coffee maker and a table that had seen better days, and motivational posters on the walls that nobody read. Spreading his documentation across the table and walking through it with whoever came to look. Marcus Webb came first. Then a co-pilot named Sarah Okonkwo, who had 12 years of experience and asked the most technically precise questions Jordan had fielded from a non-engineer. Then one of the flight attendants, a woman named Patricia, who didn't ask about avionics or hydraulics, but asked one question that Jordan thought about for a long time afterward. Do you trust it? Patricia said. She was looking at him, not at the documents. Yes, Jordan said. Not the paper, not the certification. You. Do you trust it? Jordan looked at her. I've been doing this for 15 years, he said. I've never put my name on something I didn't trust. I'm not starting now. Patricia looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded. Okay, she said. She came to work on Thursday. But the flight didn't happen Thursday. It didn't happen because Wednesday evening, Jordan received a call from a number he recognized as belonging to one of the board members he'd met at the contract reconciliation meeting. A man named Arthur Briggs, who had sat at the far end of the table and said almost nothing during the entire discussion, but whose presence had carried the particular weight of someone accustomed to being the most powerful person in rooms where everyone else was also powerful. "Mr. Mitchell," Briggs said, "I apologize for the late hour." "What can I do for you, Mr. Briggs?" "I'm calling about the departure scheduled for tomorrow." Jordan sat up straighter. "What about it?" "There's a contingent on the board that wants to delay it. The aircraft is certified. The crew has reviewed the documentation. Captain Delgado has confirmed he'll fly." "I understand that," Briggs said. "The concern is not the aircraft's condition. The concern is the optics of departing while the investigation is still active. Some board members feel that any incident, however minor, however unrelated to the maintenance history during this period, would be catastrophic for the company's position." Jordan stood up from the kitchen table and walked to the window. "Mr. Briggs," he said, "with respect, if you delay the departure, because the board is worried about optics, and that delay becomes public, the story is not, Harrington Global was cautious. The story is Harrington Global didn't trust its own certified aircraft. That story is significantly more damaging." Silence on the other end. "Additionally," Jordan continued, "I've spent the last 2 days meeting individually with every member of the flight crew. They reviewed my documentation. They made their own professional judgment. Overriding that judgment for board optics reasons in an industry where pilot authority is foundational is not something I would recommend. You've spoken with the crew directly. Every one of them, at their request." Another pause. "That was not—" Briggs started, then stopped. "Not what?" Jordan asked. "Not something we were aware of." "It wasn't something that required board awareness," Jordan said. "It was crew members asking the certifying engineer questions about the aircraft they were going to fly. That's normal. That's correct. That's exactly how it should work." Briggs was quiet for a longer moment than any of the previous pauses. "Mr. Mitchell," he said finally, "may I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead. You've been through a considerable amount of difficulty on this project. The delays, the obstruction, the payment dispute. And now you're spending your own time evenings meeting with flight crew to address concerns that are technically not your responsibility." A pause. "Why?" Jordan thought about it. He thought about how to answer honestly without making it sound like a speech. "Because my name is on that aircraft," he said, "and because my name means something to me. Not to the board, not to the company. To me." He paused. "When Captain Delgado flies that plane, he's trusting my signature. When Patricia, the flight attendant, walks down that aisle, she's trusting my signature. I didn't earn that trust by filing paperwork. I earned it by sitting across from them and looking them in the eye and answering every question they had." He paused again. "That's not above my responsibility. That is my responsibility." The silence on Briggs' end was different from the previous ones, less calculating, more listening. "The board will not delay the departure," Briggs said. "I think that's the right decision," Jordan said. "I'm beginning to think," Briggs said slowly, "that most of your decisions are the right ones." "Most," Jordan said. "I've made mistakes. I just document those too." Briggs made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Good night, Mr. Mitchell." "Good night, Mr. Briggs." Thursday morning arrived the way important mornings sometimes did, quieter than expected, almost ordinary on the surface, with the particular quality of a day that didn't announce itself as significant, but simply began. Jordan woke at 4:47. He made eggs. He braided Amara's ponytails. He packed her lunch. At the door, Amara looked up at him. "Is today the day?" she asked. "What day?" "The day the plane flies." He looked at her. "How do you know about that?" "Mrs. Patterson watches the news," she said simply. He hadn't known it was on the news. He filed that information away. "Yeah," he said. "Today's the day." Amara considered this. "Are you going to watch it?" "I'm going to be there," he said. She nodded seriously, the way she nodded when something met her internal standard of how things should be. "Good," she said. "You should be there." He dropped her at school. He drove to the airport. Andre was waiting for him at the hangar. They stood together and watched the ground crew prepare the G650 for departure. Fuel truck pre-flight walk around the ordinary choreography of an aircraft getting ready to leave the ground. Jordan watched it the way he always watched aircraft he'd worked on depart, not nervously, but attentively. The way a parent watches a child walk into their first day of school. You've done everything you can. Now you watch. Victoria arrived at 8:30. She walked across the tarmac toward them in a way that was different from how she'd walked in the early weeks, less of the contained, managed quality of an executive performing confidence. More just herself. "How are you feeling?" she asked Jordan. "Good," he said. "How are you, Belle?" "Terrified," she said. "But the good kind." Jordan looked at her. "There is a good kind," Andre said. "The kind where you're terrified because something matters," she said, "not because something's wrong." The crew arrived at 8:45. Captain Delgado in his uniform briefcase in hand, moving with the economical purposefulness Jordan had noted in their meeting. Marcus Webb behind him, Sarah Okonkwo, Patricia and the other flight attendant, a young man named Daniel. Delgado stopped when he saw Jordan. He extended his hand. Jordan shook it. "Mr. Mitchell," Delgado said. "Captain, you'll be watching until your wheel's up," Jordan said. Delgado nodded. Then he said something Jordan did not expect. "I want you to know something," Delgado said. He said it quietly, not for the benefit of anyone around them, just man to man the way serious things get said. "I've been flying for 31 years. I've had aircraft maintained by a lot of people, some of them good, some of them very good, a few of them exceptional." He paused. "I've never had a certifying engineer spend 2 days meeting individually with my crew to make sure they had answers to every question they needed answered. They asked," Jordan said. "A lot of engineers would have said that's above their pay grade," Delgado said. "A lot of engineers haven't had someone else's bad work followed by their own name." Delgado looked at him. "No," he said. "They haven't." He picked up his briefcase. He walked toward the aircraft. The departure was scheduled for 10:15 a.m. At 9:47, Jordan's phone rang. He looked at the screen. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. This was not the moment for unknown numbers. But something made him answer. "Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell." A voice he didn't recognize. Male. Professional. "My name is David Reeves. I'm a special agent with the FAA Office of Investigations. We've been in contact with Harrington Global Aviation regarding the internal investigation into their maintenance vendor relationships." Jordan went very still. "I'm aware of the investigation," he said carefully. "We're aware of your role in identifying the discrepancies," Reeves said. "I want to be direct with you. The documentation you compiled has been extremely useful to our investigation. The timeline connecting Meridian Aircraft Solutions to the operations director's hire date was something our team had not yet assembled. I'm glad it was useful. I'm calling for 2 reasons," Reeves said. "First, we may need your cooperation as a witness going forward. I want to make sure you're aware of that possibility." "I understand. What's the second reason?" A pause. "The G65 OU certified is scheduled to depart this morning." "In about 25 minutes, yes. I want you to know that our office has reviewed your certification documentation as part of our preliminary investigation. We have no concerns with the certification itself." Another pause. "I'm calling because I wanted you to hear that from us directly. Not through a press release, not through company channels, directly." Jordan breathed. "Thank you," he said. "One more thing," Reeves said. The original certifying engineer, the one from 14 months ago who signed off on the compromised component. Yes. He's cooperating with the investigation. He's provided a statement indicating that he raised concerns about the component at the time and was told by the operations department that the certification should proceed. Jordan closed his eyes for a moment. He was pressured, Jordan said. It appears that way. He's not the architect of what happened. No, Jordan said. I didn't think he was. Reeves was quiet for a moment. You're a thorough man, Mr. Mitchell. I try to be. The industry could use more of that. A pause. Enjoy the departure. He hung up. Andre was looking at him. FAA, Jordan said. Andre's eyes widened. Are they? They're fine with the certification, Jordan said. They just wanted me to know. Andre exhaled. Man, he said quietly. Yeah, Jordan said. Wow. At 10:09 a.m., the aircraft door closed. At 10:14, the engine started. That sound, too, Rolls-Royce BR710 turbofan engines coming to life, was a sound Jordan had heard hundreds of times in 15 years. It never got old. It was the sound of physics and engineering and human ingenuity agreeing with each other. The sound of something that should be impossible choosing to happen anyway. At 10:15, the G650 began to move. Jordan and Andre and Victoria stood on the observation area and watched it taxi. Victoria's arms were crossed, not in the defensive posture Jordan had seen in the early weeks, but in the way people cross their arms when they're holding themselves together around something they feel. 6 weeks, she said. Not to anyone in particular, just the words into the air. 6 weeks, Jordan said. The aircraft reached the runway threshold. There was a pause. The familiar pause of final pre-takeoff check systems, verified clearance confirmed. The kind of pause that to anyone who didn't know aviation looked like nothing. To people who did, it was the last moment of one thing before it became another. The engines increased to departure power. The aircraft rolled. It accelerated down the runway with the particular urgency of 60,000 pounds of aerospace engineering committing fully to the decision to fly. The nose lifted, the main gear followed, and then the G650 was airborne, climbing through the morning air gear, retracting wings, tilting slightly as it entered the departure turn. Jordan watched it until it was small, then smaller, then gone. He stood there for a moment after it disappeared. Andre put a hand on his shoulder briefly. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Victoria turned to Jordan. Her eyes were bright in a way that she didn't try to manage or contain. It flew, she said. It flew, Jordan said. She looked at him with an expression that was trying to carry something too large for a single look. I don't know how to thank you adequately, she said. I've been trying to figure out what to say, what the right words are, and I don't think they exist. You don't need them, Jordan said. I treated you, she started. You corrected it, Jordan said. Not immediately. Nobody does the right thing immediately every time, he said. The question is whether they do it at all. She looked at him. I want to ask you something, she said, and I want you to tell me the truth. That's the only way I answer questions. When Richard was delaying your parts, canceling your orders, trying to end the contract. She paused. Did you ever think about walking away? Jordan looked at the sky where the aircraft had gone. Every night, he said honestly. At the kitchen table after Amara went to sleep looking at my bank statements. Yeah, every night I thought about it. What kept you? He was quiet for a moment. My daughter draws X's on the calendar every morning while I'm making her breakfast, he said. She was counting the days until I'd be less tired. She never told me that. She was just quietly counting. He paused. I couldn't let her count all those days for something I walked away from. Victoria looked at him for a long time. She sounds remarkable, Victoria said. She's 8, Jordan said. She gets that from her mother. A silence that was not uncomfortable. Then Victoria said, the consulting contract. I'd like to formalize it this week if you're willing. Send me the terms, Jordan said. I'll review them. Same documentation requirements. Same documentation requirements, he said. She almost smiled. I expected that. Good, he said. Then we understand each other. He left the airport at 11:30. He drove to the school because it was early release day, something he had actually remembered this time without Amara having to remind him, which felt like evidence of a mind that was beginning to unclench from 6 weeks of sustained pressure. He parked in the school lot and waited. When the doors opened and the kids came out, he saw Amara before she saw him. She was walking with her friend Kezia, talking about something with the animated intensity of children who treat every topic with complete seriousness. Then she looked up, saw his truck, and changed direction immediately. She ran toward him. He got out of the truck. She hit him at full speed in the way of a child who has not yet learned to moderate the expression of happiness. And he caught her and held her up, and she wrapped her arms around his neck, and he stood in the school parking lot holding his daughter, and thought about nothing for approximately 15 seconds. Just held her. Did it fly? She asked into his shoulder. It flew, he said. She pulled back and looked at him. Good, she said. Now can we work on fractions? He laughed. A real laugh, the full kind, the kind that came from somewhere in his chest that had been closed for a while. Yeah, baby, he said. Let's go work on fractions. He put her in the truck. He drove home. The painting of the abstract airplane was still tucked behind the visor where she'd put it for luck. Jordan Mitchell drove home through the ordinary afternoon of an ordinary city, carrying something that had taken 6 weeks and 15 years and the entirety of who he was to earn. Not the money, not the contract, not the recognition, just the knowledge solid and complete and entirely his, that when it mattered he had not moved. The fractions took 45 minutes. Not because Amara was slow, she wasn't, but because she wanted to understand them, which was different from wanting to finish them. And Jordan had learned early in his role as her only parent that the difference between those two things was the difference between a child who memorizes and a child who actually knows. He sat at the kitchen table with her, the same table where he'd spent 6 weeks looking at bank statements after she went to sleep. And he worked through every problem with her until she wasn't just getting the right answers, but could tell him why they were right. At the end, she looked at her worksheet and then looked at him. I get it now, she said, simply, like a door opening. Yeah, he said. You do. She gathered her papers, went to her room to put them in her folder, and came back carrying something Jordan hadn't seen before, a folded piece of paper that she set on the table in front of him, with the careful deliberateness of someone presenting something they had been holding onto for the right moment. What's this? He asked. I wrote you a letter, she said. When you were tired, I didn't give it to you then because I didn't want to make it worse, but now it's over so you can have it. Jordan looked at her. When did you write this? 3 weeks ago, she said. On a Tuesday. He unfolded the paper. Her handwriting second-grade careful letters, slightly uneven, the particular earnestness of a child who was still learning to make her handwriting match the seriousness of what she meant, filled about half the page. Dear Dad, I know you are working very hard. I see you at the table at night sometimes when I get up for water, but I don't say anything because you look busy. I want you to know I am not worried. Mrs. Patterson says you are the best at what you do. I think so too. I drew you a picture of the airplane on the visor so you have good luck. I love you. Amara. P.S. We are almost out of orange juice. Jordan sat at the table for a long moment. He did not trust himself to speak right away, which was fine, because Amara had already moved on to getting a snack from the cabinet with the complete emotional efficiency of an 8-year-old who had delivered the important thing and was now moving to the next item. We are almost out of orange juice, Jordan said finally. I know, she said, head in the cabinet. I put it in the letter so you'd remember. He folded the letter. He put it in his shirt pocket next to the pen he used to sign certifications. I'll get some tomorrow, he said. Can we get the kind with pulp? We can get the kind with pulp. Okay, she said, satisfied. Complete. Jordan sat at the table a moment longer, the letter in his pocket, and felt with a fullness that was almost painful in the way that real things sometimes are. Exactly how much of this? All of it, the entire 6 weeks, every document and every delay and every conversation with every powerful person who had looked at him and seen something insufficient had been for the girl currently eating crackers by the refrigerator and worrying about orange juice. The consulting contract from Harrington Global arrived by email the following Monday morning. Jordan read it 3 times. It was not a small contract. Quarterly fleet safety audits across all company aircraft. Direct reporting authority to Victoria Harrington. His own documentation protocols written into the agreement as mandatory standards. Compensation that, when Jordan calculated it against his current workload, represented an increase in annual income significant enough to change the arithmetic of his life in concrete ways, not extravagant ways, not ways that would make him someone different, but ways that would mean not calculating whether he could afford a new tire for the truck, or whether Amara's school trip deposit would clear before the heating bill came out. He called Andre. "Tell me the number," Andre said before Jordan even started. Jordan told him. Andre was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. "Jordan," he said. "Yeah. Yeah. Are you going to take it?" "I'm going to negotiate 2 things," Jordan said. "I want a clause that explicitly preserves my independence. If I find a safety issue, I report it. Period. No pre-approval from anyone. No review by operations before it goes to Victoria's office. And the second thing, I want Andre Collins named as the designated assisting technician on all audit work." A silence on the other end. When Andre spoke again, his voice was different, lower. The voice of a man who hadn't seen something coming. "You're serious," Andre said. "You've been with me for 6 years," Jordan said. "You found things on that aircraft I would have found an hour later. Your name belongs on this." "Jordan, man, don't," Jordan said. "Just say yes." A pause. "Yes," Andre said. Jordan sent the contract back to Victoria's office with 2 requested amendments. She accepted both within the hour. 3 weeks later, Jordan began the first formal safety audit of Harrington Global's full fleet. It took 11 days. He found 7 issues across 4 aircraft, none as serious as what he'd found in the G650. Oh, nothing that represented immediate danger, but 2 hydraulic irregularities, a fuel system sensor that was reading within tolerance, but trending in a direction Jordan didn't like, and 4 documentation discrepancies that weren't fraud, but were the kind of careless record-keeping that became fraud's prerequisite when someone needed to hide something. He reported all 7 in writing to Victoria's office. Victoria presented the findings to the board. The board, to their credit, authorized immediate corrective action on every item. Gerald Harrington called Jordan personally after the board meeting. 7 findings, Gerald said. Across a fleet that has been operating for 20 years with what we believed was a sound maintenance program. 7 findings in 11 days is not unusual, Jordan said. That's what happens when you look carefully. Is it bad relative to industry standards? It's not good, Jordan said honestly. It's not catastrophic, but not catastrophic isn't the standard. The standard is right. Gerald was quiet for a moment. My daughter tells me you've been in aviation for 15 years, he said. Yes. Why haven't you been running your own company before now, doing this kind of work? Jordan thought about how to answer that honestly. Because the kind of work I do doesn't get offered to people who look like me by companies who don't already trust them, he said. And trust in this industry gets built through relationships that were mostly built before I started. Another pause from Gerald. The kind of pause that came from a man who had built a company over 40 years and was being shown clearly and without drama, a mechanism he had not previously examined. That's a problem this industry has, Gerald said slowly. Yes, Jordan said. It is. It's a problem this company has contributed to. Yes, Jordan said. It has. Gerald was quiet for a long moment. I'm going to ask my daughter to do something, he said. And I'm going to ask you to support it. What's that? We're going to change how this company identifies and evaluates maintenance contractors, starting from the ground up. And I'd like your input on what that process should look like." He paused. "If you're willing." Jordan sat with that for a moment. "Send me a proposal," Jordan said. "I'll look at it." "You'll look at it," Gerald repeated, and there was something in his voice, something Jordan might have called, in another context, humility. "Not accept. Look at it. That's how I handle proposals," Jordan said. Gerald made the sound again that might have been a laugh. "Good night, Mr. Mitchell." Ned. The investigation into Richard Caldwell concluded 14 weeks after he was placed on administrative leave. Jordan learned the results from Special Agent David Reeves, who called on a Friday afternoon while Jordan was in the middle of rechecking a maintenance log on one of Harrington's smaller aircraft, a Cessna Citation CJ-4, that the audit had flagged for fuel sensor trending. "The federal investigation has concluded its initial phase," Reeves said. "I wanted to tell you directly since your documentation was central to the case." What were the findings? Richard Caldwell had a concealed equity stake in Meridian Aircraft Solutions. He approved the vendor contract directed business to them, worth approximately $4.7 million over 3 years, and in at least 2 documented instances, approved components that he knew or should have known did not meet certification standards. Reeves paused. "He's been referred for prosecution on multiple counts. Wire fraud, intentional endangerment of aircraft safety, and a few additional counts that the U.S. Attorney's Office is finalizing." Jordan set down the maintenance log. "The previous certifying engineer," Jordan said. "The one from 14 months ago." "Cooperating witness," Reeves said. "His certification was coerced under pressure from the operations department. The documentation he provided corroborates everything you found." "Is he going to be all right?" A brief pause, the kind that comes from a federal investigator being asked a human question in the middle of a professional conversation. "His cooperation is being considered," Reeves said. "That's all I can tell you." "Okay," Jordan said. "Mr. Mitchell," Reeves said, "I want to say something that's outside the scope of this call, but that I think needs to be said." "Go ahead." "When we received your documentation, the full package, everything you compiled from day one, the completeness of it was remarkable. The timestamps, the photographic evidence, the cross-referencing of supplier records against personnel dates, the records of every communication and every delay." A pause. "In 15 years of investigating aviation safety cases, I have never received documentation from a maintenance contractor that was more thorough or more clearly organized." Jordan said nothing. "Most contractors, even good ones, don't document at that level," Reeves said. "Most contractors trust that the people above them are operating in good faith, and they don't build a record as if they might need to prove everything from scratch." "I learned a long time ago not to assume good faith was enough," Jordan said. "What taught you that?" Jordan thought about the regional carrier, 20-something years old verbal report senior manager who told him he was mistaken. The near incident 3 weeks later. "Experience," he said. "Well," Reeves said, "your experience in this case may have prevented a catastrophe. I wanted you to know that the federal record reflects that." After he hung up, Jordan sat with the phone in his hand for a moment. $4.7 million. 3 years. An operations director who had looked at him across a boardroom table and said, "You should be grateful for the opportunity," and who had meant it, who had genuinely believed that Jordan Mitchell was someone to be managed, minimized, and if necessary, discarded. Jordan did not feel triumphant. He felt the particular quietness that comes at the end of something long and hard, when the thing has been resolved, but your body is still calibrated for the fight that no longer exists. He picked up the maintenance log. He went back to work. The industry noticed, not immediately, not in the way of headlines or press releases, in the way that things move through professional communities, through conversations at industry conferences, through the particular informal network of pilots and engineers and safety officers who talk to each other at the margins of formal meetings about what actually happens inside organizations. Captain Delgado, It turned out, talked. Not to journalists, not publicly. But Delgado had 31 years of relationships in the aviation world. And when he told people about the G650, about the engineer who had found what 3 major companies had declined to find, who had documented everything, who had met individually with every member of his crew to answer their questions before the first post-repair departure people listened. Within 2 months of the G650's first flight, Jordan had received 3 inquiries from private aviation companies asking about his audit availability. Within 4 months, he had received a request from a small regional airline to conduct an independent safety assessment of their maintenance protocols. He turned down 2 of the private aviation inquiries because his Harrington commitment was his first obligation, and Jordan Mitchell did not make commitments he didn't intend to keep. He accepted the third, a company whose safety officer had been referred to him by Captain Delgado, and he accepted the regional airline assessment because Delgado had also been the one to send them, and because the safety officer, a woman named Dr. Maria Santos, had called Jordan herself and said something he hadn't expected. "I've heard how you work," Dr. Santos said. "I don't want someone who tells me what I want to hear. I want someone who tells me what's there." "That's what I do," Jordan said. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm calling." Andre, who was present for that call, looked at Jordan afterward. "We need a bigger shop," he said. "We need a better filing system," Jordan said. "Jordan, we're turning down work." "We're turning down work we can't do right," Jordan said. "There's a difference." Andre looked at him. "So what's the plan?" Andre asked. Jordan looked at the whiteboard on the wall of the shop, the same whiteboard where he'd mapped out the G650 repair schedule 7 months ago. The one that still had a faint ghost of those original marks under the current work schedule. "Hire 1 more technician," he said. "Someone with FAA Part 145 certification and at least 8 years of experience. We don't compromise on qualification." He paused. "And we expand the documentation system before we expand anything else. Every new client gets the same level of records as Harrington. That's not optional. That's what we are." Andre nodded. "And the shop?" Andre asked. "We'll need more space by the end of the year," Jordan said. "I'm already looking." Andre looked at the whiteboard. At the current schedule. At the list of incoming inquiries that Jordan had written in the corner in his small, neat handwriting. "6 months ago," Andre said quietly, "you were funding aircraft parts out of your personal savings account." "Yeah," Jordan said. And now we're looking for a bigger shop," Jordan said. "So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's do the next job right." Mrs. Patterson came to dinner on a Sunday in November, the way she had done periodically for the 3 years since Diane died, invited herself, brought cornbread, and sat at the kitchen table while Jordan cooked, and Amara set the places with the particular ceremonial seriousness she applied to anything that involved the good forks. Midway through dinner, Mrs. Patterson looked at Jordan. "You seem different," she said. "Different how?" Jordan asked. "Lighter," she said. "You've been carrying something for a long time. You still are. You'll always carry some of it." But something shifted. Jordan looked at his plate. "A lot happened," he said. "I know. I watched the news." She pointed her fork at him. "You never told me how serious it was." "I didn't want you to worry." "Jordan Mitchell," she said in the voice she must have used with 40 years of students. "I am 71 years old. Worrying is one of the few things I can still do at full capacity. Don't take it from me." Amara giggled. Jordan looked at Mrs. Patterson across the table. "I was close to losing the house," he said. It was the first time he had said it out loud to anyone other than the numbers in his bank account. Mrs. Patterson set down her fork. "How close?" she asked. "Close enough," Jordan said. "I was 3 months out from a conversation I did not want to have." The table was quiet for a moment. "But you didn't," Mrs. Patterson said. "No." "Because you didn't walk away." "Because I didn't walk away." Mrs. Patterson picked up her fork again. "Diane would have said you were the most stubborn man she ever loved." Jordan looked up. "Like a compliment," he said. "Like a compliment," Mrs. Patterson confirmed. Amara looked between them. Who said that? Your mother used to say that about your father, Mrs. Patterson said. Amara considered this. She was right, Amara said with the complete conviction of someone who has done her own assessment and reached her own conclusion. He is very stubborn, but the good kind. Jordan looked at his daughter. The good kind, he said. The kind that doesn't quit, Amara said. That's what Mrs. Patterson says stubborn means when it's good. Jordan looked at Mrs. Patterson. Mrs. Patterson looked back at him with the expression of someone who has been quietly doing important work for 3 years and doesn't need credit for it. Eat your cornbread, she said. He ate his cornbread. In December, Victoria Harrington launched the program she had been building since the week after the board meeting. She called it the Mitchell Standard. She had not told Jordan she was naming it after him. He found out when she sent him the program documentation for review, and he opened the cover page and read the title. He called her immediately. You named it after me, he said. I did, she said. Victoria, let me finish, she said. The program establishes mandatory independent safety audits for all contracted maintenance work. It requires direct engineer-to-executive reporting for any safety concern above a defined threshold. It mandates complete documentation protocols, the ones you used as the minimum standard for any certifying engineer working with this company. And it establishes a vendor evaluation process that removes operations department sole authority over supplier approval. A pause. Every one of those elements came directly from watching how you work. Jordan was quiet. The name matters, Victoria said. Not to market the program. To remind everyone inside this company what happened when those standards were absent. What it cost. What it almost cost. Her voice was steady, but not without weight. Your name on this building is not an honor. It's a reminder. Jordan sat with that. I appreciate it, he said, but I want to say something. Go ahead. The program is right, he said. The standards are right. But don't let the name become the thing. Don't let people follow the Mitchell Standard because it's named after someone. Let them follow it because they understand why each requirement exists. How do I make them understand that? Tell them the story, Jordan said. Not the cleaned-up version, the real version. Tell them about the compromised component. Tell them about the pilots who wouldn't fly. Tell them what a $100 million aircraft looks like when nobody will put their name on it. He paused. Understanding comes from the truth, not from a name on a policy document. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. You're right, she said. I know, he said. She made a sound that was definitively a laugh. Good night, Mr. Mitchell. The last conversation Jordan had about the G650 case came from someone he hadn't expected. It was a Tuesday evening in late December. Amara was at Mrs. Patterson's for a couple of hours while Jordan finished paperwork at the shop. He was locking up when his phone rang with an unknown number, and this time the area code was from a city 3 states away. He answered. Mr. Mitchell. The voice was young, male, slightly nervous in the way of someone making a call they had thought about for a while before actually making it. Speaking. My name is Darius Osei. I'm a first-year aircraft maintenance technician. I just got my FAA certification 4 months ago. A pause. I read about your case, the G650, what you found, and what happened with the company. Jordan leaned against his truck in the parking lot. What can I do for you, Darius? I wanted to ask you something, Darius said, and I know this is probably a weird call. Ask. In my first job, I've been there 4 months, I found something in a maintenance record that didn't match the physical condition of a component. Not as serious as what you found, but it didn't match. He paused. I told my supervisor. He said I was being overly cautious. He said the previous technician had signed off on it, and I should trust the chain. Jordan said nothing. He waited. I documented it anyway, Darius said. On my own. I kept a record, and my supervisor found out, and he... A pause. He told me I was creating problems. that I was undermining the team's process, that first-year technicians don't override experienced signatures. What was the component? Jordan asked. A fuel line fitting on a Beechcraft King Air. There was microfracturing in the collar that wasn't visible in the maintenance photo in the record. How did you find it? I held it up to the light at a different angle, Darius said. I wasn't even looking for it. He paused. I just looked at it like it was real. Not like paperwork. Like an actual physical object that would go into an aircraft that would carry actual people. Jordan was quiet for a moment. Darius, he said. Yes, sir. What you did was correct. I want to say that clearly and without qualification. What you did was exactly correct. A silence on the other end. My supervisor is making it difficult, Darius said. He controls my performance review, and I'm 4 months in. I don't have the standing to... You don't need standing, Jordan said. You need documentation. Have you kept copies of everything? Yes. I documented every conversation, every date, the photos of the fitting. Good, Jordan said. That's the right thing. But what do I do now? I can't... Darius stopped. Jordan could hear the weight in that pause. The particular weight of a young person who has done the right thing and found that doing the right thing has a cost they didn't fully anticipate. I can't fight a supervisor on my first job. I don't know how. Jordan stood in the parking lot in the December cold. He thought about 24-year-old Jordan Mitchell standing at a payphone outside a regional carrier hangar, having just been told by a senior manager that he didn't understand the system. He thought about the 3 weeks between that conversation and the incident on approach. He thought about what it had felt like to be that young, and that certain, and that unable to make anyone listen. You don't fight him, Jordan said. You report it. There's a difference. Fighting is personal. Reporting is professional. You take your documentation, everything you have, and you report it to the FAA directly through the aviation safety hotline. You don't need your supervisor's permission. You don't need seniority. You need documentation and honesty, both of which you have. What if they come back to me at the company? They might, Jordan said honestly, and that will be uncomfortable. But there are whistleblower protections in aviation safety reporting. Your documentation is your protection. He paused. And Darius, that fitting. If you're right about the microfracturing. I know, Darius said quietly. Then the discomfort of reporting it is a fraction of what you'd carry if you didn't. A long pause. You reported everything, Darius said. And they tried to end your contract. They delayed your parts. They brought in lawyers. Yes, Jordan said. Was it worth it? Jordan looked up at the December sky. At the navigation lights of a small aircraft passing overhead, making its way from wherever it had been to wherever it was going with people inside it who trusted completely with their lives, that someone somewhere had looked carefully at every component that held them in the air. Ask me something easier, Jordan said. Darius almost laughed. Almost. I already know the answer, Darius said quietly. I just wanted to hear you say it. Jordan thought about the letter in his shirt pocket, the one with the careful second-grade handwriting and the postscript about orange juice. Yes, Jordan said. It's worth it. A pause. Okay, Darius said. Okay, I'm going to report it. Good, Jordan said. Document the date you made this decision. Document this conversation. Document every step. I will. And Darius. Yes, sir. Call me when it's done. Let me know how it goes. A silence. Then, you'd want to know. This industry needs people who look at things like they're real, Jordan said. I want to know how you do. He drove home in the December dark. He picked up Amara from Mrs. Patterson's, and on the walk back across the 2 driveways that separated their houses, Amara slipped her hand into his without saying anything. Just reached up and took his hand the way she'd done since she was old enough to reach. Inside, he made hot chocolate. The real kind, from cocoa powder and sugar and milk on the stove, the way his own mother had made it, a recipe that existed nowhere written down except in his memory. Amara sat at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around her mug and said, "Mrs. Patterson told me about the thing she said, about what Mom used to say. The stubborn thing. Yeah." She looked at her mug. "Did Mom really say that?" "All the time," he said. "Was she right?" "About the stubborn part, definitely," he said. "About whether it was good." He paused. "I think she thought so. I think she thought it was one of the better things about me." Amara looked up. "I think so too," she said. Jordan sat across the table from his daughter in the ordinary warmth of an ordinary kitchen and understood completely, without any of the noise and urgency that had surrounded the understanding for 6 weeks, what the whole thing had been for. Not to prove he was better than anyone. Not to win. Not even to be right, though he had been. It had been for this. For the ability to sit here in this kitchen and look at this child across a table and know, in the place where a person knows things that are true, in the way that facts never quite capture, that he had not allowed the world to make him into something smaller than who he was. That when the question had been asked, not out loud, not by any single person, but by the accumulated weight of every dismissal and every delay, and every room where he was the only person who looked like him, and the only person whose judgment was treated as optional when that question had been asked, his answer had been clear. He was Jordan Mitchell. He was Amara's father. He was a man who put his name on things he believed in and refused to put his name on things he didn't. And no title, no authority, no amount of institutional power, no well-dressed man in a wool coat standing in his hangar had been able to change that. He had not defeated prejudice by becoming more powerful than it. He had defeated it by refusing to become less than himself. That was the victory. That was the one that lasted. Amara finished her hot chocolate and carried her mug to the sink, rinsed it the way he'd taught her. "Rinse it now, don't leave it for later," and turned around. "Dad," she said. "Yeah?" "I'm glad you didn't quit." Jordan looked at her. "Me too, baby," he said. "Me too." She went to brush her teeth. Jordan sat at the kitchen table for a moment longer, the same table, the same chair, the same kitchen, and felt the silence settle into something it had not been for a long time. Peace. Not the absence of difficulty. Not a promise that the next job would be easier, or that the next boardroom would be kinder, or that the next man in a position of authority who looked at him would see what was actually there. Just the deep, earned quiet of a man who had done what he came to do. Jordan Mitchell closed his laptop, turned off the kitchen light, and went to tell his daughter good night. And in the dark hangar of a private aviation company, $100 million aircraft that 3 companies had refused, and 1 man had refused to abandon, sat ready. Certified, documented, signed, bearing the weight of a name that had meant something before the world tried to tell it otherwise, and meant something still.